everybody, and welcome to this Wednesday, Tuesday? What day is it? I don't even know.
It's Tuesday. You're good.
Oh my gosh, you guys. Tuesday. Woo! Time flies when you're having fun. Welcome to the Tip-Off Show, the show that sets the stage for the most important news, daily fantasy plays, and bets on tonight's 7-game NBA slate. I am your host, Kayla Canarum. I have no idea what day of the week it is. Joining me today, we have Greg Ehrenberg and Eric Lindquist. Guys, how are we doing today?
Yeah, doing pretty good. It is Tuesday. I don't know. What day did you think it was?
Wednesday. I don't know.
All I know is that this is a perfect... This is a perfect segue, though, because it's almost as if time doesn't matter because of the Time Lord.
That was deep.
That's deep.
Yeah, Kayla's not going to get that. I don't even know that Kayla understands what that reference is.
I don't.
It doesn't matter. It matters to me. YouTube chat, they'll like it, I think. No, they probably won't. They don't like anything. But it's fine. I'm excited. What's going on?
Maybe I'm confused because today is my Thursday.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, not only that, but you've had a week. I'm not too worried about you. You're just fine. Just the fact that you're here, you're a stud. You're a stud in my book.
Well, thanks, Eric. We were talking before the show that we have two comedians with us today.
You have one.
Cracking jokes.
You have one. I'm the source of the jokes, and I'm happy to be that person. I like being the outlet.
All right. Well, fans, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for countless hours of content on the NBA, NHL, PGA, MMA, NASCAR, and every other sport that is in season. And if you're not able to watch your favorite Awesemo shows on YouTube, almost all of our Awesemo YouTube shows are available through the Awesemo Podcast Network. We've got a podcast for every sport, and we're available on every major platform. So head on over to awesemo.com/podcast to check out the latest. Just leave a 5-star review on one of our podcasts and your Twitter handle or email address, and you'll be eligible to win a free week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. One winner will be awarded every Friday, and reviews are eligible for up to 1 year, so best of luck. Not only that, but to celebrate the NBA's second half, we have a special deal for all first-time users of Awesemo Plus. Get 50% off an Awesemo Plus weekly pass when you use promo code Shamrock at checkout. That's $15 for full Awesemo Plus access to all DFS sports, including the NBA, PGA, NHL, NASCAR, MMA, soccer, esports, and college basketball projections just in time for March Madness. This offer is for first-time users only and is valid through March 17th. Stop guessing, start winning, join Awesemo Plus today. I just realized why I feel so awkward. I don't have my mic in front of me.
That's fair.
It's
I knew something was different. There was something popping. It wasn't the purple sweater. It wasn't anything else. It was flat out. Yeah, the Easter. Easter is approaching, I suppose.
I know. I went casual today.
Is purple an Easter color?
It's like a light purple, like a kind of a lighter. I don't know. It's kind of like
lavender.
Those muted lavender. Yeah, that's fair. It's like
it's
yellow or pink. It's what?
Pink and purple are my favorite colors. I know.
Oh, that's actually super sick. Never mind.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Legit.
I'm keeping in the NBA theme.
Yeah, I can't afford that kind of stuff. It's too nice for me. I get free golf polos from golf tournaments and stuff, but that's about all I got.
And we have Superman with us over there too.
Yep.
Yeah, this shirt I believe cost $15.99, and it's within my budget. It's within Eric's budget. I mean, anybody, even if you live at a Holiday Inn like Eric does, you could easily afford this shirt.
Motel 6, get it right.
It's different. You move because they kick you out. You kick you out after your stays because you overstay your welcome. You don't pay your bills. Like you're always trying to haggle with the concierge. No, they don't let you stay in one hotel for multiple period of time. Eventually, they kick out the deadbeats.
That's what happens when you roster Derek White. Can't help it.
Look at us getting off track in the first 5 minutes. All right, you guys, before we get to key news, bad beats from last night. Did you have any?
Oh, Derek White. Oh, God. I didn't even necessarily like him. He was kind of like a necessity of the slate. I could have gone to just about anybody else in the range, sitting down there. I could have punted with Campazzo and lived to tell the tale, but I had so many good lineups. I had so much Marcus Morris Sr. I had so much Zubac, which again, the center was just smashing left and right yesterday. So you needed Holmes, you needed maybe Jonas Valanciunas until that blowout. Jokic went completely off. So Zubac wasn't necessarily, he was kind of a guy that I was very, very high on. I got him under 4% on Fanduel, but it really didn't matter. I still got slaughtered on this slate because all the other guys went off. And then Derek White was just awful and got in foul trouble too, which I didn't really see coming.
I had a pretty good slate yesterday. I guess it's just a minor complaint, but I was in first in a lot of the second iterations of GPPs on DraftKings, got passed by Campazzo lineup. So I wish the Campazzo scored a little bit less fantasy points in the fourth quarter. I think there was a steal that went to like Will Barton that got stat corrected and changed to Campazzo. That caused somebody to pass me, but I mean, nothing to complain about.
Nice, dude. Yeah, it felt like a great, how much late swapping did you do? Because I feel like that's something that I keep trying to preach over and over on the Slate Starter article and the podcast with Rinpack. Like, were you on Zubac and Morris to begin with, or did you pivot onto a bunch of them later?
So I had some of them in my lineups on the chance that no Ibaka played. And then once he was out, I ended up with like 75% Zubats, like 60% Morris or something like that. I just switched them into as many lineups as I could.
Yep. You were doing things correctly, my sir.
All right, let's head over to our key news. This just in, Tristan Thompson is out for the Celtics. Eric, we're going to start with you. What do we do with the Celtics lineup?
So, I mean, it's almost like they knew on both sides. Obviously, Time Lord Robert Williams, that was what we were alluding to earlier on the reference. That's his nickname because apparently he was late for a bus once. I had to look into the lore of this last night late. This is ironic that Tristan Thompson would get ruled out because I don't do many like deep dives on players, but I just thought it was so interesting to see his elevated price tags on both sites. But he was like late for a bus one time, and he kind of like apparently goes by his own clock. He's like late to stuff randomly. So they gave him the nickname Time Lord, like in the Celtics Twitter sphere. So I guess that's kind of the origin of it. But played at Texas A&M, a guy that if you ever got over 24 minutes of him ever, he would be an absolute smash. So there's definitely some viability, even at those elevated tags on both sides. This is a pretty unreal stat. So Robert Williams has played in 13 games over the last month, and he has not exceeded 23 minutes in one of them. But he has still exceeded 30 Fanduel points or more in 7 of the 13. That's pretty phenomenal. Like, that's efficiency, and that's just a high fantasy point per minute guy. So if we're going to get 24, 26 minutes of him, I'm excited to see kind of what he's able to do with extended run.
Yeah, I don't know how extended the run is going to be, though. I was just figuring out the Celtics rotation before. I think the starting lineup is going to be Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Kemba Walker, Daniel Tyson, Marcus Smart. So I think there's going to be a timeshare between Daniel Tyson and Robert Williams. I kind of got hung up on for that second because I was thinking like puns in my head. I was like, well, timeshare, but then I was like, I don't want to do it, but like I'd already said it halfway. So I was like, well, now I'm committed at this point. But yeah, so I think right now I'm giving Daniel Tice 26 minutes and Robert Williams 22 minutes. I don't think they're going to share the court together. And the issue with Robert Williams is he was really cheap a few weeks ago, but he's not anymore. He's 6,000 on FanDuel. He's 5,600 on DraftKings. So even giving him 22 minutes, a little bit more than usual, it's not enough to want to roster him. It's also center's a pretty loaded position today. There's a whole lot of value on both DK and FanDuel at the position. So then Robert Williams, I mean, even if you give him 26 minutes, that would be, I think, way too high of a projection. But even in 26 minutes, a tough matchup against the Jazz, you're probably looking somewhere in the neighborhood of 32 fantasy points if you give him 26 minutes. And even then, I only think that's a marginal play given what his salary is on both FanDuel and DraftKings. So given all the salary, all the value at the center position, what his salary is, like at first when we saw Tristan Thompson, I was like, oh, I'm going to play a whole bunch of Robert Williams now, but he's just too expensive. And I wish he was cheaper or else I would have really liked him. But I think that ship is passed at this point.
Is there some viability maybe, though, at 5,600 where you can play two centers? We're going to get to Moses Brown, Tony Bradley, which are two big pieces for this slate. But would you at least think there'd be some viability at that number? FanDuel, it's going to be tough to get to, even though that's generally where I like to kind of get some of the block steals upside from. But 5,600, you're going to have no interest probably, or maybe a little bit.
No, because in 22 minutes right now, I have him projected for about 25 fantasy points. And it's not great for a 5,600 price tag. And especially on, even if this was a slate actually that didn't have so many great centers, I would still look at that projection in the minutes and just think of him as a marginal play. And then you consider the opportunity cost associated with him with all the centers that are available. So just not something I'm interested in.
Okay, Bazley and Horford are out for the Thunder. Lou Dort is questionable. Greg, what do we do with the Thunder team?
Yeah, so there's a whole lot to unpack here because the Oklahoma City Thunder, George Hill remains out. And then obviously Al Horford now, he's resting. I don't think Al Horford's going to play all that much for them in the second half of the year unless he gets traded to a contender. And then even then it's probably going to be a marginalized role. But So Moses Brown is one of the chalk plays on the slate, actually the highest owned player on the slate across Fanduel and Draftkings right now. And I think that makes sense. We've only seen him on the court for a very limited amount of time while he's been in the NBA, but still, I mean, the results have looked pretty good from a fantasy production standpoint, playing 10 minutes per game this year in 10 games, averaging 12 and a half DraftKings points in those games. So if he's going to play somewhere in the neighborhood of 26, 28 minutes, maybe even 30, it's hard to know exactly how many minutes they plan on playing him because he started last game, but he only got 24 minutes. And it was because he fouled out. So if he didn't foul out in those 24 minutes, he was probably going to play somewhere in the neighborhood of 30. And if you're going to give him those minutes at his current points per minute production, then you're looking at, like 35 fantasy points for Moses Brown at a really cheap price. So he's a chalk play. And I think for a good reason. I'm going to be overweight to the field on him. And I think he's somebody you absolutely have to roster in cash games.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's difficult to imagine a situation. I miss the days when that kind of stuff went overlooked, when people were just looking at a box score, didn't take into account fouls, didn't take into account some of his run there. I saw him probably getting to like 28 minutes before, and obviously not seeing that happen. If you go to the boom bust tool, he'll have negative leverage, but like he's still showing up in the optimal percentage, almost 50% at the time. That's a ridiculous number for any player in any situation. He's booming 55% of the time, so I don't really care that there's negative leverage in this spot. He's just such a good play. He's so cheap on both sites. It's going to be hard not to have gobs and gobs of him.
And then I'm just going to ask you really quick, in terms of leverage here, what do you think happens if Moses Brown fails? So if he gets into early foul trouble, is there somebody else that you are looking at on the Thunder that could potentially provide value that maybe you wouldn't have in the same lineup as Moses Brown, but maybe a good leverage play for tournaments?
Yeah, I mean, the natural answer would be going to like Isaiah Roby, because he would maybe get some extended run sitting at those center minutes. He's been popular. He's close to a fantasy point per minute guy on DraftKings on the season, 0.94. I wouldn't mind getting to a little bit there, but he's not near the minimum. And we have another guy that's sitting there at center as well that would provide a direct pivot. He's going to be at half the ownership in Tony Bradley. You could probably go that direction. I don't know. I could say Pokashevsky as well. That, he's a 7-footer playing small forward and the 4 for this team. He could maybe get some extended run there too. Chicago doesn't necessarily have like a true centers to begin with either. You're looking at Lauri Markkanen. You're looking at Thaddeus Young. A lot of these guys who are playing 4 and 5. Lauri Markkanen was in the starting lineup at the 5 the other day. A guy that I don't necessarily think of as like a down in the post banger, getting a bunch of boards for the center position. So I guess for me, I could probably take some pivots for the direct leverage to Roby, but just because he isn't free on this slate, on a very stars and scrubsy slate, it's still going to be hard for me to like want to go there.
So I'm going to set up a rule in Fantasy Cruncher to not include Moses Brown and Isaiah Roby in the same lineups. And then I'm just going to try to force myself to probably like 15% Isaiah Roby, just because I think that's a good security blanket in case Moses Brown, it's Moses Brown, right? This is a guy who none of us knew who he was like 3 days ago. So he's a massive chalk play. The numbers look like he should definitely play really well in a start, but it's somebody we have basically no data on. So there's a pretty wide range of outcomes here, but I agree with you. I think that if he does not go off, it's probably because he gets into foul trouble, or maybe just Isaiah Roby plays really well and ends up playing the bulk of the center minutes. So Moses Brown, good chalk play, but I think there are ways that we should probably try to get Isaiah Roby into lineups, because I don't think Moses Brown is somebody that we want to like lock in and go 100% on.
I would say, though, one thing in terms of the grouping for it, because Roby, I guess, 5,300 on DraftKings, that is kind of the little bit of pushback to it, is the fact that he is not free. Generally, I wouldn't have a lot of pushback if they were both under 4K. So I guess the group makes sense in that situation. But in 33 minutes that Roby played in their last game out, he had 9 turnovers. He only put up 23. I expect if you were to get anywhere close to that same ballpark of like 28, 30 minutes in a game where Moses Brown does fail, he's going to play exponentially better than that. So I guess I am on board with getting a couple shares of Roby as well.
All right, let's head over to the Bulls. They are changing the starting lineup. Tomas and Thaddeus, we're on a first name basis over here, are starting over Kobe White and Wendell Carter Jr. Eric, what do we make of this change up?
Well, DraftKings didn't notice that Thomas Satoransky was like the most owned play in the entire world the other night. 26 minutes, put up 33.5, played better than I expected him to. I wasn't sure how these minutes were going to break down. I thought Kobe White might still see like the lion's share of minutes, and he did by one, basically 27 minutes to Satoransky's 26, and they shared the court for a couple minutes there, obviously. But yeah, 3,600 is just too cheap for him again. We're going to see some crazy stars and scrubs lineup. I don't play a lot of cash, but I think on DraftKings today, I'm going to find it hard not to have a little bit of exposure because I'm going to try to get different in some of these tournaments. But Satoransky at 3,600 is just a tough number to get away from. The one guy that I guess did fail that I expected to play better was Thaddeus Young, who only saw 23 minutes. Obviously, part of that could be the fact that they ran Toronto out of the gym in the fourth quarter. Didn't necessarily need to push him there. Lauri Markkanen played 32 minutes and also in the starting lineup there. The one guy that I wasn't on at all, and I don't think anybody was really on, was Patrick Williams, who sees a little bit of a usage bump. It would make sense. He did shoot efficiently well, 9 for 14 from the field, 4 for 5 from 3, put up a couple extra counting stats too. So like Patrick Williams still at 4,600 on DraftKings, somebody to take some shots on, not garnering a ton of ownership at the moment. But Satoransky is definitely still, now that we've seen the security in those minutes being 24 to 26, I'm going to find it hard not to get to quite a bit of him today.
Yeah, it's weird what the Bulls are doing here, just because, I mean, it's like, hey, we have the play-in game, and it's just they're selling out everything to try to make that game. Like, I know there's a team that at least there's been indications that they're not in love with Kobe White. They're not in love with Lillard Markkanen. They're apparently not in love with Wendell Carter Jr. I don't know if it was true or not, but remember there was all those rumors going into the draft that they were trying to trade Wendell Carter Jr. to get a draft pick. There was rumors that they were willing to trade the 4th pick and Wendell Carter Jr. to get the 2nd pick and then draft James Wiseman with that flip. They didn't end up doing it, so who knows if that was true or not. But I mean, now that Wendell Carter Jr. has lost his starting job, I mean, it does seem like there's a lot of indications here that Wendell Carter Jr.'s been and has fallen out of favor in Chicago. So yeah, they don't seem to like a lot of the young guys that they have on their team. So as long as they keep the same starting lineup, which I haven't seen anything to suggest otherwise, then Kobe White and Wendell Carter Jr. stock way down for both of them. Thaddeus Young, I think about fairly priced on FanDuel at 6,800. So not really as much for priority play. They're a little bit cheaper on DraftKings, so he's worth getting to. Satoransky, I'm going to like on both sites. And then something interesting about him on FanDuel, 4,200. The price has gone up a little bit, but he's not really picking up that much ownership. It was 13% the last time I looked in GPPs. So Satoransky, I think somebody worth going overweight on FanDuel GPPs, even though his price has gone up a little bit.
What do you think about Lauri Markkanen on FanDuel, who's actually the highest owned of all the Bulls right now at 16%? He's a tough guy for me to get a gauge on what to do today because I'm expecting him to be starting at the 5 again. I don't know what to think about the fact that they did blow him up by 23 and trying to figure out exactly what to do with these minutes with this new. I mean, I wish that game had stayed closer just so we had a better idea of what they were tracking to do. But Lauri Markkanen gaining the most ownership feels a little off to me right now. I didn't know if you felt differently.
So I think the issue I have with Lauri Markkanen GPPs, and it's a favorable price point. I have him in my player pool right now, actually a little bit overweight to the field. The only issue I would have with him, though, is that I don't think he really has a massive ceiling. But he doesn't have to at a 5,500 price tag. I mean, the last couple of games, or let's say the last 3 games now, he's scored 30, 28, and 29 FanDuel points. So at a 5,500 price tag in a favorable matchup against the Thunder, I don't have an issue with that. So the other thing also is if you're not rostering Lauri Markkanen at 5,500, just there's nobody else to like in that price range. I think that's something else that's really having me get to him. It's going to change if Clint Capella's out, and we'll talk about that game in a sec, then John Collins becomes really favorable at 6,500. But as it stands now, there isn't a whole lot to like at that price point. So I guess that's what's having me get to Lauri Markkanen.
All right, love it.
Greg, excellent segue. Clint Capella is questionable for the Hawks tonight. If he sits, what do we do? And if he plays, what do we do?
Roster John Collins. I mean, if he plays, I'm going to like Clint Capella. If he's out, then John Collins. I mean, Collins started at center last game and ended up playing 31 minutes. We haven't seen a game in a while where John Collins got over 30 minutes. And that was a game that was a blowout. They ended up beating the Cavs by 18 points. Collins barely played in the fourth quarter. Still scored almost 40 fantasy points. Ended up with 22 points, 12 rebounds. I don't think the fit is great with him and Capella. When John Collins gets to play center minutes, he's much more effective. So if Capella's out, Collins becomes one of the best plays on the slate. If Capella's in, then I don't really have that much interest in Collins. So that's a pretty wide range in how to view John Collins on this slate.
Yeah, and because Houston is so bad, there's one other name that I'm going to throw out there, but you need both pieces of news. You need Capella to be out and you need Okongwu to be out. Nathan Knight went completely off in garbage time against Cleveland, played 23 minutes. He's at the exact flat min at 3,500 over on FanDuel. I'm just kind of have him bookmarked as a guy that has like less than 1% ownership, as he should right now, because in a current role where Capella is in, or Okongwu, who's also questionable, is in, is somebody that kind of slips through the cracks there. But I just want to let it be known, have Nathan White on a little piece of paper because he's a viable guy at the min. You can play him alongside Bradley, have two guys at 3,500 on FanDuel at power forward, which I don't know if I would necessarily want to do that, but I could see having a crazy other roster construction. And again, 22 minutes from a guy who would probably be close to a fantasy point per minute. We've seen like no run from him whatsoever. So 23 minutes against Cleveland is one thing, but Houston also profiles as a team that doesn't really have a whole lot of center depth. And we've seen centers just eviscerate them of late against Patton.
All right. Derrick Rose is out. Elfrid Payton is doubtful for the Knicks tonight. Eric, who do you like for New York?
It's kind of a lot of the usual suspect situation here. I mean, Quickly's coming off a game where we just saw him as mega chalk. The one thing about this is that this is a better defensive situation than what they had against Brooklyn the other night. But we're seeing the ownership be about appropriate. Julius Randle has just been so good. Well over 1.3 fantasy points per minute here lately. You also take a guy like Derrick Rose off the floor. You take a guy like Elf Payton doesn't really matter, but Julius Randle has been just kind of like otherworldly. At the power forward position, he's kind of a guy at 9,200 who I think is just kind of like mispriced. You get Joel Embiid off the floor, and I don't know why that price came down. I mean, I guess to account for a Philly matchup where Embiid would have been on the other side. But yeah, I'm going to get to quite a bit of Julius Randle on this slate over on FanDuel. Over on DraftKings, it's kind of the similar situation. I guess we got to talk a little bit about Quickly again, who is going to be somebody who is in play randomly, 5,800. We've seen that price tag go up. I don't know if he necessarily would have gotten all the run towards the end of that game if Frank Ntilikina hadn't fouled out. So that kind of freaks me out a little bit that he wasn't going to get any of that fourth quarter run towards the end of that game. Ntilikina fouled out. He got his sixth foul like at the 3 or 4 minute mark, I believe, watching that game last night. So I get a little bit iffy on trying to like go back to the well on him there, but obviously a really good price point still on FanDuel at 5,200.
Yeah, so Quickly, I just look because we have an ownership update. So Quickly at 5,800 on DraftKings has 35% projected ownership.
Oh, good Lord.
And
okay, sorry, I saw 5%.
And on FanDuel, it's 41%. So here's one of the issues I have. I assume he's going to start. He started last game. He played a good amount of minutes. Tom Thibodeau's rotations are so inconsistent that it's hard to look at any one guy who isn't Julius Randle and be really confident in their playing time. So yes, Quickly is going to be in my player pool, but I'm not viewing him any differently than I did yesterday, where he was in about a third of my lineup. So it was a significant portion, but it was still fairly underweight to the field because he ended up being around 50% owned on FanDuel. And then on DraftKings, he was anywhere from 40 to 55% owned, depending on the GPP. So Quickly is going to be one of my higher owned players just based on his projection, but it's still going to be fairly underweight to the field because the field's rostering them in nearly half of their lineup. So individually, I think if you're just looking at points per dollar, yes, Quickly is one of the better plays on the slate. Play him in cash games, but in tournaments, I'm going to be a little bit underweight to the field on him just because the matchup against the Sixers is difficult. And there's also a lot of variance in Tom Thibodeau rotation where he generally doesn't like to play rookies. And then also just the playing time has been inconsistent for everybody as is. So just to summarize there, I'm not totally anti-Quickly. I'm just not going to get there as much as the field is.
Yeah, and if I could tell you right now you were going to guaranteed to get 34 minutes of Quickly, I'm pretty sure we would both be over the field at where it's at, right? Like that's pretty much a foregone conclusion. Like we'd be over 40% if we got a guaranteed 34 minutes of Quickly at 5,800 on DK.
No, I don't think I would still.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I wouldn't be guaranteed. There's a lot of value plays on the slate.
Right.
I mean,
yeah, for me, it's purely because he's the second best fantasy point producer on this team in general. He's been averaging 19 minutes a game. So if you got any extended run with him up to the 30s here, like if you told me he was guaranteed to get 34 minutes, I would absolutely be over top of the field. But I don't think that that's a guarantee. And I guess, he wasn't going to close that game before the foul out of Ntilikina, but he still got to 34 minutes. So I guess that's one positive in that column.
All right, so bringing up Quickly's rates this year, he is scoring a little bit over a fantasy point per minute, but it's also a really difficult matchup. So let's say, to be fair, we're going to give him a baseline of 1 fantasy point per minute for this particular matchup. So give him 34 minutes, then we're looking at 34 fantasy points for Quickly at 5,800. Obviously, that would be a great result, except that's not a result I look at and be like, I need to have this guy in 100% of my lineups, just when there's other guys on the slate like Moses Brown, Tony Bradley. We talked about Satoransky already, Pokashevsky. These are still all going to be guys that I project to be better on a points per minute basis, even if we were to give Quickly those 30 plus minutes. So once again, this isn't a total just me railing against Quickly. It's just there's a whole bunch of guys that I want to get exposure to as value plays.
All right, let's head over to Philly. Joel Embiid is out. Greg, still a lot of good plays on Philly's roster. Who are you going with, if any?
Yeah, so Tony Bradley, his price has just not been adjusted on Fanduel or Draftkings. Fanduel is just still min price. Draftkings is a little more expensive at 3,700, but it's still too cheap considering that the last 2 starts we've seen from him, averaging over 20 minutes per game. He's a guy who each of the last 3 years has averaged over a fantasy point per minute. So Tony Bradley, one of these stronger cash games on the slate. For Fanduel, I think you absolutely have to roster him in cash games. And then I think that even with the slightly elevated price on DK, still somebody I want to get to. Ben Simmons also is somebody who I'm going to want to get to more than I normally would when Embiid's on. Like I almost hardly ever roster Ben Simmons in games where Embiid is out there. And even when you take Embiid off the court, it's not that Simmons gets great rate changes. But the difference is that the Sixers have been more willing to play Simmons extended minutes in games without Embiid over the last couple of years. So that's the main reason that I like Simmons more than I normally would is just because I think he could play upwards of like 36 to 38 minutes in this game.
Yeah, and on FanDuel, he's 8,200 at point guard. I'm gonna get to a lot of that, I think, in this spot. I really like going there. You can also play him at small forward over on DraftKings, which is kind of my priority in choosing to utilize him over there. We saw against that Utah game. I guess that Utah game just kind of sticks out in my mind because I went from having like no interest in him, then maybe MB got scratched very last second there and ended up to gobs of him and Harris, and they just went completely off in that game. Simmons was assertive. Simmons looked like a different dude. I'm kind of throwing the last game out the window because it was such a blowout. Might have disappointed some dudes against the Spurs, but that wasn't on any of the main slates at least. So there's one plus there. He didn't treat anybody poorly in that regard. I like getting to him. I like getting to Bradley. I like getting to Harris. I don't think any of that should be surprising on this kind of a slate, and the ownership reflects that. Obviously, Dwight Howard's a guy at 5,200. If you're looking for a pivot on FanDuel to kind of get different from this team, I think he is viable at that position because of how much ownership is going to be going towards Moses Brown and some of the other guys. I think it's a stacked center slate, but at 5,200, he might slip through the cracks. And we have seen multiple times where Doc Rivers has just kind of thrown caution to the, just reckless abandon, played one guy more than the other, regardless of if they were starting or not.
Okay, Kevin Love is doubtful for Cleveland tonight. Eric, how does this affect what you'll do with the Cavs?
I think for me, this is just it's kind of a gross spot in general. Like I was kind of high on Jared Allen the other night. It didn't really come through. I'll probably get to a little bit again, but not somebody that I'm going to be jamming into my lineups here. Larry Nance is by far gaining the most ownership out of all of them. He's got a 30-minute projection. That's fine. 4,700. We have seen some upside from him before. The problem is you have to compare him to, first of all, he's not unowned. Second of all, you have to compare him to a Pokashevsky, to some of these other dudes who have kind of uninhibited run, guys that are for sure going to play 30 plus minutes. Larry Nance, I'm not completely sold on trying to go overweight in that spot, but it is definitely kind of a little bit of an unknown. Basically, Cleveland hasn't had Kevin Love to begin with. Even he's only played 10 minutes in the 2. He's still coming back from an injury. They're just kind of slowly progressing him. I'm not really sure what their plan is with Kevin Love, but I'll probably get to a little bit of Larry Nance, but I don't think I'll get close to the 18% he's at right now on DraftKings.
All right, so I think there's a different conversation with Nance on DraftKings versus FanDuel, because on FanDuel, he is picking up no ownership. So on FanDuel, Nance is at, I think it was 2% last look. And by the way, ownership projections are free if you go to Awesemo.com. So anybody can go look them up. So I don't care about giving out the ownership of anybody because anybody can check them. They're free. But I mean, 5,400 for Nance at 2.5% ownership. I haven't projected to score over 30 fantasy points today because with Kevin Love out, I think he's going to start. And as long as that's the case, I think that Nance is going way, way overlooked on FanDuel. The matchup against the Heat isn't ideal, except Nance has been a good fantasy producer for the season. If we look at his playing time since coming back, he's played as many as 29 minutes. The issue with the playing time from him in the two Cavs games, I don't really think it's any kind of restriction on him. It's that they've gotten their ass kicked in both those games. Last game, they lost to the Hawks by 18. The game before that against the Pelicans, I don't even know if I could do the math to figure out how many points they lost by off the top of my head. They lost by
a lot.
Like 30. It was like 34 points they lost by, I think it was. So that's really what's limited Nance's minutes more than anything. As long as he starts with Kevin Love out, I think he probably eclipses 30 minutes unless the Cavs just get smashed again, which that is a possibility. But at 2% ownership on FanDuel, I think he's a good GPP play.
I like that.
All right. Bam is expected to return to the Heat tonight. Greg, what do we make of this?
So with Bam back, here's what the real key is. Jimmy Butler has been ridiculously good over the last handful of games, and he's also become very, very expensive. He is 11,000 on FanDuel, and then his DraftKings price isn't quite that high, except it's 9,800. So he's gone way up on both sites. And just considering what the salary is on Jimmy Butler now at his peak price, and with Bam Adebayo coming back, I'm pretty comfortable leaving him out of my player pool. So that's really what the key is here for me with Bam Adebayo coming back. And the other thing also, Kelly Olynyk, who his minutes have fluctuated a ton this year. He could play 30 minutes. He could play 18 minutes. It's been all over the place, but generally his minutes have been more consistent in games that Bam Adebayo has been out. Now that he is back, I don't really have interest in Kelly Olynyk either. So Bam Adebayo coming back, I don't have interest in him as an individual play because I think his minutes could be a little bit limited, but it's enough to take away from Kelly Olynyk and Jimmy Butler and make the Heat a team I'm going to stay away from.
I think I'm still going to get to some Jimmy Butler on DraftKings. The tag over on FanDuel is absurd, but he was a 1.57 DraftKings points per minute guy with Adebayo on the floor this year, off the floor. But he's still averaging 1.41 with him on it. He's still kind of discounted underneath the 10K price, even at that 1.4 number for the amount of run that he is receiving. I'm still going to take some shots there. Nothing out of the ordinary, but the rest of the game, it's just so gross on this slate to be looking at a total, that's already dipped 3 points from 209.5 to 206.5. That's kind of one of my main pushbacks of the Nance or any of the other Cavs taking shots in that regard too. It's just not a great game environment when you do have spots otherwise on this slate that are just exponentially better. So I still will get to some Butler, but that's really about it from that entire game.
Okay, CJ McCollum is returning to the Trail Blazers. Eric, what does this mean for Portland?
Crap. I'm upset and I'm sad because the Pelicans are just getting to be as bad defensively as what we were hoping for forever. This was going to be like the stack du jour game. It's the late night hammer. We have all these good things that were just lining up, and CJ McCollum comes in and ruins the day. Lehigh's own CJ McCollum. Good Lord. NCAA tournament aficionados will recall that game. Oh my God, did he go nuts against Duke? But anyway, 238 total. You're looking at a lot of plays that would have been super viable in that spot. I still think you could spike an upside from a Carmelo shooting game or whatever, but you're bringing 28% usage CJ McCollum in. I don't know what those minutes will be. That's really kind of the thing. We'll see if we can hear about a minutes limit, see what pops up there. I'm going to right now cap him at like 22 and kind of see what happens from there. I don't expect him to get some crazy amount of run, but what I do expect him to do is chuck the ball when he's on the floor. And that creates the problems because a lot of these Portland guys that I would want to be targeting, I would be targeting for shooting upside. Now, Damian Lillard has a ceiling no matter what. Damian Lillard has a ceiling on any basketball team, whether it's an all-star game and he's chucking it up from half court or whatever. He's got an upside. I'm just going to probably be light on him today. I don't feel like there's any need that I want to go there, although this game environment is awesome.
Yeah, so here's something I'm a little conflicted on with Damian Lillard. I don't project him well really at all with CJ McCollum being back, but there's also so much value on this slate. And unless I'm going to have LeBron in like 100% of my lineups, which I don't think I'm going to be 100, but I'm going to be really high on him just because I don't like these other high-priced options all that much. And so Damian Lillard, he's not picking up much ownership, and I don't project him well with CJ McCollum being back. I don't have him in my player pool right now, and I'm just conflicted. Have you built lineups yet for this slate, Eric?
Yeah, I did one. I tried to do one crunch beforehand just to kind of see what happens at like my baseline level. Just put in like a set 10% randomness and see what happens. I got no CJ McCollum. I can let that be known. I was getting like 5% Damian Lillard, but I would have to really want it. And I understand getting over the field and like double clicking the thumbs up and finding a way to get there, because again, you might have a ton of salary. And, for me on Fanduel, there are a bunch of 3,500 plays at the complete minimum that I think are very intriguing that are getting no ownership. Nathan Knight, if everything breaks his way, Matisse Thybulle, if he's in the starting lineup, 3,500. So I will have salary to spend. So Damian Lillard, it's not a product of like, if I can get up to him and play him, obviously he would make a phenomenal tournament pivot compared to everybody else. But I don't know. Right now, I don't want to like jam 3 or 4 of those guys into the same lineup and make that the route in which I get him. It would have to happen more organically than it is right now.
All right. So I think he's more viable of a play on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings. I have him in a small amount of FanDuel lineups, but much less than what the field has. I don't have him at all on DraftKings, but on FanDuel, so he's at 10,100 and we have CJ McCollum coming back. And Damian Lillard has scored over 55 FanDuel points once in his last 10 games. And now we're also bringing CJ McCollum into the mix. Like, I know there's always upside in Dame. I don't know how realistic it is that he hits that upside number with all these factors and him coming back. So Lillard, I think, is just going a little bit too highly owned on FanDuel. DraftKings, I'm probably just going to look elsewhere to spend up. I'll be going to a lot of LeBron. I'll probably get to Karl Anthony Towns. Maybe even I prefer Julius Randle to Damian Lillard, but Dame at 10,800 on DK. I don't think I'm going to be getting to him now that I'm really looking at the price point.
I talked you into it a little bit. But here, I understand though. There's viability for anybody with Dame's profile from his history. We know that he has a ceiling on any team in any situation, but yeah, too much ownership. Even like 8%, 10% is going to be too high on this kind of a slate where there are other places to go for $1,000, $2,000 cheaper. And I think it elevates the floor of your lineup on DraftKings quite a bit too.
All right. And that's going to do it for our key news of the day. Moving on to our one-on-one battles. In these battles between stars, which player would you rather have in NBA DFS? First up, we have the battle of the centers in Moses Brown, who, since we're talking about projected ownership, currently has the highest projected ownership on DraftKings, falls a little farther down on FanDuel. Taking on Tony Bradley. Greg, who are you taking in this one-on-one?
Yeah, it's Moses Brown for me. Like we said, somebody said in the chat earlier, I forget who it was, in the YouTube chat, said that if I'd watched more Thunder games, I would know that Moses Brown isn't all that good. It's like, I don't know, he's played 50 minutes all season. You could watch every Thunder game, you don't know anything about him. So I just have to work with the numbers that I have so far, and that is he's in the limited amount of times he's been on the court, he's scoring 1.25 fantasy points per minute. That's pretty good production. And if he's somebody that's going to stay out of foul trouble and play somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 minutes, I prefer him, even though we haven't seen the massive minutes from Moses Brown. Like when he started the other day, he also fouled out in that game. Tony Bradley, we've seen him start this year, and in general, he splits the minutes with Dwight Howard when Joel Embiid's out. So I do think that Tony Bradley is a good play, except I think that Moses Brown is a much higher ceiling just because I think that he has an actual path to 30 minutes of playing time that Tony Bradley doesn't have.
Yeah, complete agreement. And that's kind of the thing, is that the security that exists around Moses Brown, I mean, obviously is reflected in the fact that he's twice as owned on DraftKings, that he's twice as owned in so many spots. Obviously, you can play him at different positions on FanDuel, but DraftKings specifically, you're saving $200 and you're getting more guaranteed minutes. So it's not particularly close between those two for me, but there's obviously viability. If you're trying to figure out a way to get different, not that Tony Bradley's completely different, but he is coming at half the ownership. Find the $200, get up to him and fade Brown and hope that disaster strikes, because, my lineups will be dead, but yours will not be.
All right, let's head over to our next one-on-one. We've got Zach LaVine taking on Ben Simmons. Eric, who are you taking in this one-on-one matchup?
I like Ben Simmons simply because of the ability he has to do multiple things on a floor. He has triple-double upside. We have seen scoring upside. Again, I'm referring to that Utah game this season with Joel Embiid off the floor. He is a little bit more assertive. A couple of these games without Embiid have kind of gotten out of hand. They've been blowing out teams regardless. So I think at 9K over on DraftKings, you're able to play him at a weaker small forward position as opposed to having to play Zach LaVine at 9K over on shooting guard there. Different positions on FanDuel. Obviously, I'll probably get to a little bit of both of them. I'll be lighter on LaVine, though, I think, than the field on FanDuel as well. Definitely going to get up to an 8,200 Ben Simmons on FanDuel. That's just not a price that I'm concerned about getting to a bunch of at all. But on DraftKings specifically, where they are the exact same price, I think the fact that you are able to roster him at small forward is a big, big plus in his category.
Yeah, I have these two guys projected within a tenth of the fantasy point of each other, so I don't really think there's all that much that separates them. But I do prefer Ben Simmons right now, and then I'm just going to check what the latest ownership is, see if we have any big changes here. Ben Simmons projected for, which is funny here, because I just said I have them projected within a tenth of the fantasy point of each other. Draftkings projections for ownership today, 14.9% for Simmons, 15.1% for Zach LaVine. So not a whole lot that separates them there either. I have the slightest of leans towards Ben Simmons. I think without Embiid there, like I said before, he is a pretty high ceiling for minutes.
Kayla, heads or tails?
Ooh, tails.
Okay.
It wasn't that important. All right. What, are you flipping a coin now, Eric?
I mean, I was thinking about it. I felt like that was the way to, if it's going to be that close, let's just let fate decide. Screw it.
Did you actually flip a coin, or did you just say heads?
I've just faked flipped a coin. I thought it was a bit. It wasn't very funny. It's fine.
He's doing improv.
Just right, improv. So, but I'm not as funny as you. Before the show, you threw an absolute slammer in there that can't be beat. So I'm just trying to live up to your hype.
So does heads mean play Simmons or LaVine? Like the whole thing.
Okay.
How about I thought it was LaVine. I was
going
for Simmons.
There's a random generator that we can do on the phone. 1 or 2. 1 or 2. 2. Guess it's LaVine. Guess we're playing LaVine.
Okay, right. There we go.
That settles that.
Settles it. Let's move on to our next one. We've got Jaylen Brown taking on Brandon Ingram. Greg, who are you going with here?
So Jaylen Brown versus Brandon Ingram. This is actually something I hadn't even considered, but when I wrote this down earlier, that Tristan Thompson wasn't gonna play. Maybe that increases the rebound equity a little bit for Jaylen Brown, but still, I don't like to make a habit of rostering guys going up against Utah. Him and Brandon Ingram, both similar price, project for similar ownership. But I'm going to lean towards Ingram just because he has such a more favorable matchup going up against Portland compared to Jaylen Brown going up against Utah.
I'm right there with you. Also, Jaylen Brown is a guy that I don't play very often because I tend to side on the side of Tatum when it's an either or situation for that. But just looking at the game environments in general, I am much higher going to Brandon Ingram in this spot. I would do it 100 times out of 100. I'm an absolute mark for Brandon Ingram.
Yeah, and then comparing their DraftKings ownership, which did a second ago. Also, it's another one almost exactly the same. Brandon Ingram projected for 16% ownership right now, and Jaylen Brown projected for 13% ownership. So really similar there too. So just give me Ingram, who I think is the better play on this slate.
Agreed.
All right, in our final one-on-one, we've got LeBron James taking on Damian Lillard. Eric, what do we do here?
It's going to be LeBron for me. I kind of was glad to see that they blew Golden State out the door the other night, because I thought there was a chance that we were going to lose LeBron James, who I thought was going to be an elite pay up option on this slate. Similar to Simmons, you can play him at a forward position or at the small forward position specifically on DraftKings. On Fanduel, he makes my favorite pay up if you are going to pay up at small forward. There are going to be some other options to be going. Obviously, we've got KJ Martin or Kenyon Martin Jr., whatever his name actually is. Fantasy Cruncher keeps screwing with my head. He's one or the other. All I know is that he's 3,500 and one of the best plays that you can have on the slate over there. But then LeBron James is sitting there also at 35%. Kevin Porter Jr. makes an elite play. I mean, small forward is a very, very important position on FanDuel. Generally one that we're looking to punt, but God, you got to get it right today. And I think it's hard to go wrong if there are other punts like Tony Bradley, Nathan Knight, who I'm not going to put my flag in him. Again, it's just like a pure punt kind of situation. If I'm punting at other spots in my lineup, LeBron James is going to be a priority play for me. And with CJ McCollum back, Damian Lillard just isn't that today.
Yeah, give me LeBron with CJ McCollum back. I mean, a lot of overlap ends up happening because when we put the questions down ahead of time, I kind of forget, like, hey, we might talk about this exact situation earlier. And I've already said that I like LeBron a lot more than Damian Lillard. So I haven't changed my mind in the last 7 minutes. But instead, here I'm going to address, we did get a super chat from Andrew Kang. He said, what's up, guys? Just got off work. You missed everything that we've talked about so far. Can you please give me a recap of everything that we've said that's at least semi-important? That would maybe be a little bit hard to say everything, but here's how I thought we could do. Eric, give me your favorite pay up option for the slate and then your 2 favorite value plays.
Okay. Moses Brown, favorite value play. I would say on both sites, on FanDuel specifically, Kenyon Martin Jr., KJ Martin Jr. And then probably favorite spend up. I mean, we just talked about LeBron, but I think on DraftKings, 9,800 Jimmy Butler is a guy that I'm kind of planning on going over the field on.
All right. So for me, LeBron, clear pay up option for me on both FanDuel and DraftKings. I like him a whole bunch today. Moses Brown is a cheap option. Also somebody that I like on both FanDuel and DraftKings as a really strong FanDuel value play. I think Tony Bradley, a little more FanDuel specific. Tomas Satoransky, who I like on both sites, but I think is a better value play on DraftKings than he is on FanDuel.
All right. That sums it up. Let's talk about our sponsor, No House Advantage, who is taking a different spin on daily fantasy sports by offering player prop contests across the NBA, MLB, NFL, and PGA for cash prizes. This exclusively peer-to-peer fantasy sports platform levels the playing field and makes it easier for you to win real cash compared with your traditional DFS sites. The best part is you can join for free today. Just download the No House Advantage app today and use promo code Awesemo to receive a first match deposit bonus of up to $50 tonight. Be your friends, not the house. Win big with player props today. Which brings us right into our No House Advantage prop or not. Guys, here are some of No House Advantage's top props of the day for our key players. Do you like the over or under on them? We're going to start with Reggie Bullock, points plus rebounds plus assists, over under at 12.5, Greg.
Yeah, Reggie Bullock, who was randomly a hero for me, who I did not put him in lineups last night because I liked him a whole lot. It was just because, hey, here's somebody who's cheap who's going to be playing extra minutes, and he lets me pay up for guys. And I thought that at the 3,500 price tag, he was just somebody who opened up other opportunities. I did not expect him to play 42 minutes and actually play really well against the Nets. So that ended up being pretty lucky. But still, I mean, with Derrick Rose and with Elfrid Payton out, I think we have to expect pretty substantial minutes for Reggie Bullock again. So give me the over on 12.5. That's fairly low considering he played 42 minutes yesterday.
One man's hero is another man's devil. I had no Reggie Bullock. It was unfun. Therefore, I was not profitable on DraftKings, which was sad. But yeah, I'm right on the over there too. It's a spot where we are seeing the extended minutes that exist there. It's just too low of a number. Looking over at No House Advantage, I love the fact that they're static. I love the fact that we can kind of take the combination of everything. I wouldn't mind getting to the rebounds one either. I think that that's looking pretty darn good too at 2.5, taking the over there, just because he is seeing exponentially more court time with all of the guards that are out for the Knicks. But points, rebounds, assists is probably the preferred path to go. A guy who could probably just get there on points alone.
Kendrick Nunn, points plus rebounds plus assists, over under 18.5. Eric, over or under?
Yeah, it's going to be an under pretty much this game in general. I would be shocked if there weren't a number of props that we couldn't go to that were going to be positive unders, just because of a 206 total. Something sitting as low in that ballpark is not going to be a great spot to go to. We get Bam Adebayo back, who is going to kill a little bit of all the value that exists for some of these other pieces, other than Jimmy Butler, who I think still is positive at 1.4 plus fantasy points per minute on DraftKings. But on NHA, I'd be signing on the under for a lot of these Miami Heat players that aren't Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, so it's just a situation where we have Bam Adebayo come back. Not to mention also that we had other guards that were out for the Heat at times. We've had Goran Dragic miss games. We've had Tyler Hero miss games. So there's been individual times where Kendrick Nunn has had to step up. He's moved into the starting lineup. There are times where he's played, 35, 36 minutes and had really big games. But now that everybody's finally healthy on the Heat, something we really haven't seen over the last month or so, I think this is going to ding everybody on the team. So Kendrick Nunn gets a big downgrade, and Kelly Olynyk, who may or may not be the best, the next prop, he's also going to get a downgrade.
Well, Greg, I'm glad you brought up Kelly Olynyk because he's sitting at over under 7.5 rebounds. What are you doing with him?
The under. And this is also really a direct result of Bam Adebayo coming back. The two guys that get hurt the most with Bam Adebayo back in the picture, it's number one, Jimmy Butler, number two, Kelly Olynyk. So Olynyk, it's just the playing time for him has been so all over the place in games that Bam Adebayo has been active. We've seen Olynyk play 30 minutes alongside Butler. We've also seen his minutes dip to 18. So I think there's so much variance in the playing time here that I'd much rather side with the under 7.5 rebounds than the over.
Yep, right there with you. I think we kind of hit on a lot of the points there. As you said, like it's the return of Bam. I don't think he'll be starting. I think it's just a spot where shorting him and shorting a lot of these other Miami players, especially Kendrick Nunn, who kind of gets buried in the depth chart. We saw him in the bubble not even touch the court multiple times, but obviously he's played well enough this year that I think he's going to garner a lot of playing time still regardless. But alongside Goran Dragic, Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler, no. And then Kelly Olynyk with Bam back, definite no.
And our last prop or not, Kobe White points over under 16.5. Greg, where are you going?
Yeah, it's the under. Unfortunately, the Bulls don't seem to really have much confidence in Kobe White going forward. Lost the starting job to Tomas Satoransky, which we've talked about a couple of times. So as long as he's not starting, we have to expect he plays less minutes than normal. So give me the over, because that would be a fair number if Kobe White was still in his starting role. But since it appears he's lost that job, give me the under on basically any Kobe White props.
Yeah, Billy Donovan just comes in and creates havoc. And obviously he's trying to win games because this is a Bulls team going places, Greg. You missed that part. This is a team that's going to be in the play-in game, like the play-in tournament. Like that's all you're shooting for on this season. Like, can't beat that, right? Why not shoot the confidence of your number two guy?
By the way, the playing game is going to have so much implication on the trade deadline, because now we look at a team like the Bulls, who, right, they're like, hey, we gotta push Thad Young and Satoransky. Like, these are guys who I think in most seasons would probably be players that the Bulls would be trying to trade at this point of the season. But now instead they're starting because they're trying to get into the playing game to maybe get swept in the first round of the playoffs. Like, there's teams that are. There's only like three teams in the entire league that are more than 5 games out of a playoff spot. So I don't think there's going to be very many sellers at the trade deadline.
Billy Donovan will always hold a special place in my heart, by the way.
Florida Gator? Is
Thunder.
that why? Oh, Thunder. Okay, that's fair. There we go. I was like, I was going to the Missouri thing. My brain was going to college. Man, he was a great college coach. Yeah, Thunder. He had a couple good years there.
Yeah.
But there is that rule now. I mean, the one thing I always think about with that Thunder team with Durant, Harden, and Westbrook, we thought that they were going to have a run for years and years and years. They had that one shot and it was over. So if you can go out and have a good team now, go do it, because you never, like, nothing's guaranteed down the line.
Eric, are you trying to make me sad today?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, you've had a pretty benign week. It's been pretty relaxing.
Thanks
Nothing's
for that
happened
reminder.
No, we're just having fun. We're just putting on a smile. YouTube chat's very, very benign today too.
It's lively out there. My goodness.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, have any of you guys seen What We Do in the Shadows? Have you?
I don't even know if this is a reference to What You Do When Nobody's Looking at You, or just literally
it's a TV show on Hulu FX. It's a bunch of vampires in modern day, like living their lives. It's one of the funniest shows ever. But there's this guy Craig Robinson who's like an energy vampire, and he just basically like instigates people and does it on purpose. That is 100% Greg. Like, Greg is 100% the guy who just like sucks the energy out of unsuspecting people, kind of goads them into doing what he wants them to. I think it's like the perfect comp now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, I don't want to know what you do in the shadows.
Yeah,
I don't want to know what he does in the shadows. I wasn't listening to anything he just said. I'd like to tune out after the first part.
Because you were too focused on instigating. See, you're playing right into it for me.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it was interesting, or I'm sorry you feel that way, whatever the meme is there. But yeah, I'm sure it was good content.
Craig
All right.
Robinson.
Let's head over to Good Dog, Bad Dog. Wow,
You've gotten so much better at that, dude.
I know.
This is great.
Wow. Okay. In real life, there is no such thing as a bad dog. In betting and DFS, there are a lot of underdogs who may have no chance in their game. So guys, who's a good dog to target tonight and who's a bad one? Eric, we'll start with your good dog.
I really hate this slate in terms of trying to pick out a team to bet. I would say if there was one that I was like really targeting, I would say I'd still go on Oklahoma City 6.5. The Chicago Bulls team isn't something that I'm like completely sold, has it figured out. Obviously they're adjusting things like crazy. Whatever this Bulls line sits at, let me see what it's at here at the moment. Yeah, it's like around 6.5, depending on what that number is that you end up getting. I really like going that direction, going on the Thunder side of it. Obviously, they have a lot of depleted people, but they have the best player on the floor. Well, Zach LaVine's very good too, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is also very, very special. He's going to get uninhibited run in this spot. I could see them kind of sneaking up and getting that 6.5 number and covering. But the Bulls obviously are in turmoil. You don't completely change your starting lineup up and down and shoot the confidence of Kobe White if things are going well. So I'll take the 6.5 there.
I like the Knicks. So they're going against the Sixers. The Knicks are 7-point underdogs. And the Knicks have been good this year. The other thing also is the Knicks play at such a slow pace, and the total is only 218 points for this game. Like, the Sixers would really have to dominate the Knicks on a per possession basis in a game that's supposed to be this slow paced to cover a 7-point spread, considering how close the Knicks have played a lot of games this year. And that Tom Thibodeau really has them playing good defense. The Knicks are one of the best defensive teams in the league by defensive efficiency. I think it's tough to beat them by more than 7 points in a lot of games. And I don't even know if the line should be 7 if Joel Embiid was in, and Joel Embiid's out. So I think the Knicks are the strongest dog on the slate because that's too wide of a spread.
Greg, right back to you for your bad dog.
Ooh, this is tough. I think there's a lot of bad dogs tonight. I'm going to go with the Pelicans, who are only 2-point underdogs playing in Portland. We've got the Blazers with CJ McCollum coming back. Maybe there'll be some rust there. Maybe CJ McCollum isn't going to play a ton of minutes. I only have him projected to play 20 right now, but even so, I think CJ McCollum coming back is going to give them a boost that they haven't had over the last couple of months without him. I think they're also going to be able to stagger the minutes that he does play. I think they'll be able to keep him away from Damian Lillard to at least give them somebody who could run the offense when Dame isn't on the court. So I think that spread at only 2 points with McCollum coming back, that's another one that I think is not quite wide enough.
Oh, man. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of want to stay away from that in general. We've seen the Pelicans play some really good basketball and some really bad basketball of late. I feel like the range of outcomes for them tonight is rather wide. But yeah, I don't mind if, getting CJ McCollum back, getting back to close to full strength. Obviously, Zach Collins, some of the other pieces still out for Portland. I don't mind that. But for me, the bad dog, it sounds crazy to say, but I already got my 10.5 ticket over on the Miami Heat minus 10.5. Sometimes some of these bigger spreads, it might look a little wonky on paper. And again, in a low total game, it doesn't take much for there to kind of be issues in getting the cover there. But Cleveland is just not a good basketball team. And now Miami getting everybody back, as we said, Bam Adebayo coming back. There is no answer for him. There's no answer for Jimmy Butler. I see them being able to torch this team. I hope it stays close enough for Jimmy Butler to get there value-wise. But otherwise, I'm completely on board the Miami Heat murdering tonight.
Okay, moving on to our make or break. Which player or game currently looks like a make or break spot to you on tonight's slate, Eric?
All these 3,500 guys on Fanduel. I think that was kind of what I was alluding to earlier. I think there's a lot of sneaky spots that you can go to just make it complete stars and scrubs. I like going down to some of those small forwards down there at 3,500. Tony Bradley's at 3,500. Moses Brown's elevated. I'll put him into the grouping though, because he is a piece of value that's extremely popular at 4,200 on Fanduel. But on that site specifically, because of the stars and scrubs nature of this slate for me, I think that's going to be a big part of my builds and something that I hope I get right.
Let me think. What is going to burn me tonight? There could be a lot of things that burn me. I'm probably going to be underweight to the field on Emmanuel quickly. I think that could be a real big make or break thing for me, especially if he's going to be 50% owned. Because just to reiterate something we said before, and Andrew had asked us about this when he gave the super chat before, but if he's going to be that popular, I'm going to be underweight to the field. It does not make him a bad play, but if I have somebody in a third of my lineups in the field has him at 50%, then that's a pretty massive difference of somebody who can make or break my lineups. Okay, let's do our fade of the day. Is there one game, player, or team that you anticipate you'll have a lot less interest in than the rest of the public, Greg? Well, I did just mention Emmanuel quickly. That's probably going to be one guy, depending on what his ownership winds up being. Damian Lillard, who isn't all that popular on Draftkings, but he's very, very popular on Fanduel. And I can't imagine I'm going to get to the 30% number that he's at right there with CJ McCollum coming back. So Dame on Fanduel for me. I've always liked playing Colin Sexton. Today I will have no Colin Sexton, even at 10%. Larry Nance at 10%. This whole Cleveland team is kind of a write-off for me. So that's kind of my fate of the day, is an entire basketball team in the lowest total game with the lowest implied team total on the slate. Look at that. 1 minute to spare. Guys, any final thoughts? I got nothing for you. That was a lovely show. I had a lot of fun here today. I had a lot of fun. Flow.
Yeah, I like going back and forth and picking Greg's brain because he's pretty good at DFS, and you should probably listen to him.
There were a lot of good nuggets in there.
We ran out of time. I was going to ask Eric what his second favorite TV show was, but we're past the point.
I loved Lost back in the day. That's got a special place in my heart. Breaking Bad's up there, but What We Do in the Shadows, if you've never seen it, one of the funniest shows I've seen. It's got a specific type of humor to it, but check it out.
I probably won't, but thank you for the suggestion.
Yes.
Thanks to Greg and Eric. Hit the like button and subscribe. The Deeper Dive and Live Before Lock are up next. We'll see you tomorrow on Wednesday. Today is Tuesday. I'm Kayla Kinnear. Good night. Love you, Eric.
I bet you do.
What's up, guys? Yep.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NBA Deeper Dive presented by No House Advantage. I am Dave Loughran on Twitter at Lofty_D, LOUGHY_D, joined as always by Adam Scher at Ship My Money DFS. What's going on, bro?
How's it going? Pretty interesting slate, I guess. Kind of, I think it's kind of similar to yesterday where like there's a lot of questionable value that's probably going to end up pissing everyone off. So it should be fun.
And then you just have Houston and OKC that kind of throw a wrench into the works of everything, because I think you'd agree there are a few teams, and Josh and I did the strategy show this morning, Monday through Sunday, every day of the week. You can check that out, 10 a.m. Eastern time, to get your day started off right. There are a few games that are just wholly unappealing from top to bottom.
Yeah, the first one of the night being one of them. This slate kind of feels like it actually starts at 8 p.m. Although looking at the 5:30 injury report, Tristan Thompson's now listed as out for Boston. So there's at least, a little bit opening up there, I guess.
Well, that's really interesting. And I know all of this can be found on your free article, the deep dive. It's totally free. It's the best, most comprehensive article that you're going to find out there. Are you going position by position now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Check it out. On awesemo.com, totally free every single day of the week. And I would imagine that you didn't have many top options from this game at any position. So
I don't think I mentioned a single player. No.
There you have it. Anyway, getting ready to jump into this one. If you're just jumping in now, welcome. If you're sticking around after the tip-off, well, welcome to you as well. Hit that thumbs up. It helps us combat that YouTube algorithm. They give preferential treatment to some of these bigger companies, right? For some reason, like the ESPNs, but why, right? When you got the best free DFS content right here at Awesemo. So do that and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. It helps us a ton, and it's the easiest way to help support us. So we appreciate all of that from all of you that check out our shows each and every day. We'll kick it off with Utah and Boston. The Utah Jazz on the road, 4-point favorites, 229.5 total. So you've got a very high total in this game, Adam. It's not that it's going to be projected to be a particularly slow game. Utah over the last month playing at a top 10 pace, but there just isn't a whole lot to fall in love with here. Let's kick it off with the Jazz.
Yeah, there really isn't. And a lot of it comes down to pricing too. You just have price points on a lot of these guys where they're really where they should be, maybe even a little bit higher than they should be. Donovan Mitchell would obviously be one of the first guys that you look to whenever you're looking to Utah. And he's got a high ceiling, but he's pretty expensive. And even at a shooting guard position that's not really that deep today, you still have options up at the top in Zach LaVine and in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander that I think just look a little bit better at similar salaries than Mitchell does. Sort of the same thing with Rudy Gobert. He's averaging 32 and a half minutes per game over the last month, which is a couple minutes more than his season average, and that's good to see. He's been really productive this year, but the salary is pretty quickly increased. Mike Conley's salaries come up as well. It's just, I think, a really difficult team to get to outside of, you can certainly mix those three in tournaments. But from any sort of like optimal standpoint or top play standpoint, I think it's just really tough to get to them at their salaries.
So on the Boston side, is Tristan Thompson confirmed out right now?
I mean, he's on the official injury report. He's out.
Okay. Well, then let's start there because that at least makes this Boston team a little bit more interesting. Tatum's up well above Jaylen Brown now on Draftkings. You're beginning to see a lot of separation there between these guys, whereas earlier in the season, you didn't see quite as much. Kemba Walker at 7,100. Marcus Smart has been back. But with Tristan Thompson, and you're right, Tristan Thompson is out, COVID-19 protocols. So we've got that news, I guess you could say, working in our favor. Robert Williams is someone that you and I have talked about a lot, who just kind of has been a really solid per minute guy, like a really solid fantasy point per minute guy. But the minutes are so difficult to predict. He's $5,600 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, Robert Williams is $6,000. So what are we doing with the center position now that Tristan Thompson's going to sit?
Yeah, I don't think it makes a huge difference. The one thing that does stand out, though, is that you probably get more minutes for Daniel Theis now, and at the very least, you should get more productive minutes. He's been a better player this year when he's been on the floor without Thompson. Rebounding numbers go up as you would expect, but also a more efficient scorer because he's able to play around the rim as opposed to being kind of kicked out to the three-point line and turned into a stretch four. So I think it benefits him. I was looking on OddsShopper before the show and before the Tristan Thompson news, and I thought that over 8.5 points for Daniel Theis was one of the better props listed. That I don't know if that has moved yet, but I assume it will move because you should get more playing time for Theis and more efficient scoring now that Thompson's out. So if that's still listed, I think it looks good. And at 4,200 at a decent or a kind of weak power forward position, I think that Theis looks like a decent value here. Still a pretty brutal matchup, but I think he's just priced, to be playing alongside Thompson, which won't be the case now.
Which prop was it for Theis?
Over 8.5 points.
Okay. I'll have to look that up. I think it may be gone now, unfortunately, given the Tristan Thompson news. But if you can still get that, that's certainly a great spot to do it. So I guess I'll ask you this, then we'll move on to some of these games that we like a little bit more. Daniel Theis, among all of the other value options on this slate, and given the situation in Houston and OKC, there are a decent amount of them. How would you rank him? I'm not asking for specifics, but do you like him a lot? Is he a decent filler option? What do you say about that?
I'd say decent filler option. Like I don't anticipate going into building lineups and starting with Daniel Theis and going from there. But I do think that it's pretty reasonable to think that he could just kind of be used as a last piece in, kind of value play to open some other stuff up because we are still waiting on some other news right now. But there's not a ton of really good cheap value that you're going to feel confident in. Like there's a few plays from OKC that look pretty good. There's, a couple plays that look good from Houston, but in general, those guys are becoming more expensive too. So I think that right now he looks like a useful piece. Like it's still easy to see how he fails kind of thing because he is Daniel Theis and he is facing Utah. But I do think that he's going to look like a pretty good point per dollar value now.
You got anything else from this game?
No, not really. I mean, Jaylen Brown, you mentioned that gap in pricing between him and Tatum. I think that he is a decent option at small forward just because he is kind of cheap and it's a pretty weak position. And he's really good, obviously, but not a priority for me, just given that there are a couple of guys I like more and the matchup is pretty difficult.
All right, let's move it to Cleveland and Miami then. The Cleveland Cavaliers, once again, double-digit dogs here against pretty much anyone. 10.5-point dogs against the Heat. This total is remarkably low. I just want to make sure that I typed it in here right. Yeah, I did. It's come down even more throughout the day. I'm pretty sure, Adam, when I put this in for the strategy show today, the total was around 211. It's down to 206.5. And now actually Miami looking like they're laying 11 points at home. So You get a pretty good idea of the direction this game is or should take, but also the fact that it's just really going to be a plodding, slow-paced game. Both of these teams, neither of them are really looking to run the court.
Yeah, just a pretty unappealing spot for Cleveland in particular. Sub 100 implied total. I mean, you just don't really see that in 2020 or 2021 basketball anymore. So that definitely stands out. Miami, like you said, two slow teams, but also a solid defensive team in Miami. One spot that's kind of interesting to me from Cleveland, and again, it's not something that I'm overly confident in. It's more just that the price is a little bit lower than it probably should be. Is Larry Nance, I'm assuming, will be in the starting lineup tonight with Kevin Love doubtful. He hasn't played full minutes in either of the games since he came back because Cleveland got blown out in both of those games, which certainly could happen again tonight. But if this game somehow is competitive, you probably are getting north of 30 minutes from Nance at a reasonable price tag. So, again, nothing that I'm really excited about, but I do think that he's maybe a little bit underpriced, whereas the rest of these guys, Sexton, Garland, Jared Allen are priced a lot closer to where they should be probably.
What about Jimmy Butler? $9,800 on DraftKings and $11,000 on Fanduel. Jimmy Butler is the most expensive player on Fanduel by $600, Adam. So if you're rostering Jimmy Butler there, you're going to be doing so without a whole lot of company. But we could talk about him a little bit at $9,800 on DraftKings. He's been spectacular. Bam Adebayo is probable to play tonight, so keep that in mind. But a legitimate triple-double threat every night. And one thing I love to see about Butler isn't just that he's scoring, but he's getting to the line at an insane clip. And when you've got someone that's getting, 10, 11, 12 free throws a game on top of the peripherals, on top of his ability to score from the field, it just goes to show you that he can drop those 60-plus fantasy point games on almost a nightly basis. But what is the price point that you think seems reasonable for him? And is 9,800 reasonable tonight against Cleveland?
I mean, at this price, it really comes down to what type of contest are you playing and what's his ownership look like? Because I think that this is an example of someone, clearly Butler still has a 55, 60 fantasy point upside. I mean, he even with Bam out there, he's averaged 1.4 DraftKings points per minute in the games he's played with Bam this year. And if this game's competitive, you're expecting 34, 35 minutes from Butler. So he still has a really high ceiling. The problem is just that when the salary has increased as a result of playing several games without Bam. And in those games, Butler averaged like 1.65 fantasy points per minute. So that's what's driven the price tag up. And it makes it so he's pretty clearly overpriced from a median projection standpoint now at this salary. This is also a slate where you have LeBron James at the same position, similarly priced against Minnesota. So in terms of likelihood of success, he's just clearly not the best play there. But people are going to realize that, like so many people use optimizers now. And one of the ways you can still kind of create an edge is to factor in ownership and range of outcomes, not just, average expectations. So in tournaments, if the ownership is low on Butler, he's still a decent play because Cleveland does suck defensively. Butler is very good. And like you said, he contributes in every category. So the upside's still really high. He's just priced higher than he should be given the fact that Adebayo's back.
Right. And right now, ownership, it's very low. Even on DraftKings, it's 7%, but so is this entire team, right? He's the only player with projected ownership north of 5%. You can check all that ownership out at awesemo.com. It is free today. So exploit that. Take advantage of that opportunity. It's free along with the PGA golfer rankings and the NHL player projections, and of course, Adam's deep dive. So even if you're not a premium sub, there's definite ways to get behind the paywall today and check out the ownership and everything else we have that is free on the site. But there's really nobody garnering much ownership at all for Miami. I mean, they might be the lowest aggregate owned team on the entire slate. Maybe that in Cleveland. Not more than Cleveland. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's just tough because you have Bam coming back. Like, they are a team, though, that I'm interested in tournaments because, like you said, the ownership's low. And, Butler, we obviously just talked about. But even looking at the guards, like, it's really difficult to say with confidence that you're getting more than, say, 28 minutes from Dragic or more than 28 minutes from Hero. But at the same time, at least one of those guys is likely to play 30 minutes and have a pretty decent game. So, not priorities, but guys that I don't really mind mixing into lineups. Just to go back to the Butler point too, talking about, ownership in tournaments, like right now on DraftKings, we have LeBron James projected for 30% ownership, Butler for 7. I think LeBron is easily a better play than Jimmy Butler if you're just talking about who is more likely to score the most points tonight. But you're talking about James as a guy that averages like 1.45 fantasy points per minute, plays around 35 minutes. Butler averages 1.4 and plays 35 minutes. So you can see how similar those guys are, and you probably shouldn't have a 5-to-1 ownership gap. So it is a spot where, it's not saying like you have to just play Jimmy Butler over LeBron James, but it is one spot where if your lineup is a little bit chalkier, it probably is profitable to just plug in Butler and hope he outscores James tonight.
All right. Any other thoughts from Miami or Cleveland?
No, I think that's it for this one.
All right, then let's talk about Atlanta and Houston. Dig our heels in a little bit here. It's going to take a while. The Atlanta Hawks, 9-point favorites. Sorry, 9.5. What do we got them at? 9.5. It keeps moving. We got them at 9 now. 9-point road favorites against Houston. 225.5 total. The Houston Rockets are decimated by injuries. Already an absolutely atrocious basketball team, but Christian Wood not returning. Eric Gordon out for the foreseeable future. DeMarcus Cousins is gone. John Wall is out. Daniel House is out. And then you even have guys like Ben McLemore and who's the other one that's questionable today?
House is questionable.
House is questionable. And it doesn't even matter at this point. Nwaba was the one I was thinking of that's out. House and McLemore are questionable. But let's actually start it with Atlanta. Big favorites for good reason. The Clint Capella news is pretty compelling if he sits, but Trae Young is $9,000 on FanDuel. And that is a pretty absurd price point given the matchup, given the conditions here against the Rockets.
Yeah, crazy price point for Young on FanDuel at 9K. 10-2 on DraftKings, I think, puts him more in like tournament territory because that is a pretty expensive salary. But if he was, much cheaper, he'd look really, really good here. So it really does stand out on FanDuel. Houston, one of the fastest teams in the league, one of the worst defensive teams in the league. No PJ Tucker, obviously, to anchor that defense anymore. It's just a very weak team now. And the playing time for Atlanta's starters since the coaching change has been a little bit concerning. Like in a lot of games, you're losing a couple of minutes over what they were playing under Lloyd Pierce. But even if you get 33 or 34 minutes from Trae Young, you should be perfectly fine here, especially at that FanDuel salary. So I think he stands out as one of the top options on FanDuel.
All right. So do you like Capella if he plays?
Yeah, Houston has allowed the most rebounds per game over the last month by like 2.9 rebounds per game over the next worst rebounding team. It just sets up as a great spot for Capella, who has over a 25% rebounding percentage for Atlanta this year. It's a really good spot. Like I said, him and John Collins both are in that category where they've been on pace to play like 27, 28 minutes in most games, which is pretty disappointing. But his salary has come down a little bit. It is a Houston team that's going to miss a lot of shots, and he should just be able to grab a ton of rebounds. So if Capella is able to go, he looks really good. If he sits, it makes John Collins look a lot better because Collins has averaged about 1.25 fantasy points per minute without Capella this year. He's someone that benefits a lot when he gets run at the 5, which he will if Capella is out. So either of those guys are very strong plays, I think. Capella if he's in, Collins if Capella is out.
Yeah, I just want to take a little bit of time to talk more about John Collins and his price and what we think ownership will look like if Capella ends up sitting. So right now, Capella is legitimately questionable. I'm assuming you still have him projected in, but I don't think any of us would be surprised if he ends up not sitting. It feels like Collins not only becomes a good play, but really one of the better plays on the slate. Because assuming Capella is out, you're getting him at $6,700. It's $1,000 less than you'd be paying for Clint Capella on DraftKings in this situation. And then Collins on FanDuel, $6,500. So you're not getting Collins priced as a center facing the Houston Rockets without their actual starting center.
Yeah, exactly. And in the last game against Cleveland, when Capella was out, you got 31 and a half minutes from Collins, and he lost a few minutes to garbage time there. So his playing time benefits most likely if Capella is out. And, like I said, 1.27 DraftKings points per minute in the 5 games he's played without Capella this year. He has a 25% usage rate, a 17% rebounding percentage. It's just like a totally different player. Sort of like we've talked about PJ Washington this year when he plays center compared to power forward. It's been a similar difference in production for John Collins. So he just looks great if Capella's out, and he looks kind of, I don't want to say useless because Houston's bad enough where you could still get a good game from Collins, but he looks overpriced if Capella's in, and he looks drastically underpriced if Capella is out.
The only thing about this game that bothers me, and you don't make decisions necessarily based on blowouts. Maybe once in a while it will be a tiebreaker for you. The Houston Rockets have an offensive rating of 100.3 over the last calendar month. I mean, it is awful. 2.5 points per 100 worse than the next worst team, which is the Magic. I mean, even the Cavaliers have been markedly better offensively than the Houston Rockets. Their defensive rating is bottom 4 in the league, and they're playing at the 3rd fastest pace. So when you look at Houston, everything lines up beautifully. The fact that their defense is awful, they play at an elevated pace. The only concern is they're so bad offensively, Adam, that they just might not score any points.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you talk about a team being this bad, it kind of ends up being like, on the one hand, Atlanta's going to score a ton of, or should score a ton of points because Houston's terrible. On the other hand, will Atlanta let up enough points for this to be a competitive game all the way through the 4th? But, it is a 9.5 point spread. Like, more often than not, this game's going to be competitive, or at least competitive enough where your guys are getting close to full minutes for Atlanta. A couple other pieces too, I think, that are affected by Capella. If he sits, you'll most likely get Danilo Gallinari in the starting lineup. That would, give him most likely 30 plus minutes, make him look a little bit better. And it would also secure minutes for Bogdan Bogdanovic, who is 4K on DraftKings, 3,800 on Fanduel. He's been pretty awful this season, but he's cheap enough to where, especially in this matchup against Houston, if we can feel good that you're getting 24 to 26 minutes from Bogdanovic, he's going to grade out as a pretty good value. If Capella is in, it's a lot riskier, I think, and a lot more likely you get like 21, 22 minutes from Bogdanovic.
And by the way, when I talk about not scoring any points, I don't mean that in the same sense of football or not scoring any runs as in baseball. As we make the transition to the Houston Rockets, Adam, when I say not scoring any points, I mean not enough to stay competitive, but the great thing about basketball is that no matter how bad a team is, no matter how decimated by injuries they are, they still are going to score some points, and they're going to score a lot of points, just not in the context of, enough to beat another team. But with Houston, you're down Gordon, you're down Wood, or at least presumably, you're down John Wall, you're down Nwaba. We don't know what's going on with House or Ben McLemore. PJ Tucker's not playing, so there are going to be players that are forced into assuming a big role. And the two guys at the forefront are Victor Oladipo and, amazingly, someone that you and I took some shots on earlier this season in another sense, Kevin Porter Jr. I wish I didn't sell, right? But these two guys, they're going to have to shoulder the bulk of the load against an Atlanta team that, sure, you're 9-point favorites, but this is still not a particularly good Atlanta team. I don't think Lloyd Pierce was fired on March 1st simply because they were playing great basketball.
Yeah, I mean, they're a pretty slow team, but they're still not a very good team. Right. And the Houston news here with House and with McLemore is pretty big because even though you're not looking to roster House, most likely you're not looking to roster McLemore. If those guys are out, unless I'm missing someone, they only have 8 bodies. Oladipo, Porter, Martin, Tate, Brown, Patton, Lamb, and Mason Jones, if both of House and McLemore were to sit. So you're talking about this team having a maximum 10 bodies and potentially only having 8. So a lot of minutes potentially for these guys. Oladipo and Porter kind of just have to take on a big scoring role. In games without Wall since joining the Rockets, Oladipo's got a 34% usage rate, about a 32% assist percentage. He's very reasonably priced, 8,300 on DraftKings, 7,700 on FanDuel. Played about 30 minutes in 3 quarters in their last game when they got blown out by Boston. So, I think he's a good option. Kevin Porter, in the 2 games that he's played with Oladipo, has a 22.5% usage rate, but a 43.5% assist percentage. You saw this with Kevin Porter with Cleveland last year as well. He's a capable playmaker. He's capable of doing more than scoring, and we're seeing that in Houston too. So even though his overall numbers are skewed a little bit by the game that he played without Oladipo, he's still getting plenty of shots up. He's still very involved as a playmaker, and he's playing huge minutes. He played 30 minutes in 3 quarters last game as well. So even though his salary has come up, it basically makes it so, it's easier for him to fail, but he does still have a pretty nice ceiling for 6K on FanDuel and 7K on DraftKings.
Man, this team is going to decide a lot today. Just pulling up ownership right now. we still have Houston ownership really low, Adam. Like really low. Did you expect to see that
on
DraftKings? And I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Which site? Because there's a couple guys that are very differently priced.
Okay, so on DraftKings right now, nobody's above 12%. On Fanduel, totally different story. KJ Martin and Kevin Porter, even Oladipo, all of those guys getting a lot of love in that spot. But can we spend a little bit of time just on DraftKings breaking this down and seeing whether or not you're willing to say, you know what, they're probably a bit overpriced, maybe in the context of the slate, but none of them are getting more than 12% ownership. Like, is that a process or is that a thought process that might occur to you that, hey, maybe they are the two, like the way I see it is, yes, Atlanta plays at a slow pace, third slowest in the league over the last month, but they're playing, I think, bottom 8 defense over that span, 114 defensive rating. But at the same time, I keep coming back to, they only have 8 players, like you said, or presumably only 8 players. And Victor Oladipo and apparently Kevin Porter Jr. too are going to be very high usage guys in this offense. So maybe the ceiling is there, even though their price points seem a little bit prohibitive.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ceilings are there. I think the pricing on DraftKings is more or less where it should be. Like looking at the boom bust tool on the site, Oladipo, 12.5% ownership, 9.5% chance of being in the optimal lineup. Kevin Porter Jr., 10% ownership, 10.5% chance of being in the optimal lineup. So, I think the ceilings are still there, but I think that they're also priced more or less where they should be. Like those two in particular, Oladipo and Porter on DraftKings, I wouldn't say they're overpriced. Like if they were much cheaper, they would be guys that you're piling onto pretty quickly, but I think they're priced about where they should be. As far as the rest of the team goes, like KJ Martin's salary jumped to $5,300 on DraftKings, whereas he's minimum salary on FanDuel. So on DraftKings, I think he's assuming that at least one of House or Macklemore plays, I think KJ Martin's overpriced. Like he was basically playing backup center last game, subbing in for Justin Patton. He got a bunch of second half run, including garbage time there, and got to 31 minutes. I think just based on the way that rotation looked, that you were probably looking at like 24 to 26 minutes under normal circumstances. And with Oladipo being out there, with Kevin Porter being out there, that is going to cut into Martin's production a little bit. So whereas I think he's still a fantastic option on FanDuel, I think he's a little bit overpriced on DraftKings. Same can be said for Sterling Brown. Same can be said for Justin Patton. So if they have 9 or 10 bodies, I don't really think there's much beyond Oladipo or Porter that stands out to me on DraftKings. If they do end up with 8 bodies, then you have a $3,200 Mason Jones. You have a $3,500 Anthony Lamb you can look at.
Okay. Yeah, it's just crazy, though, looking at, say, last game, they were down by 36 points in the third quarter. Kevin Porter played 30 minutes through 3 quarters.
Yeah, huge minutes for him, Oladipo in that same boat. So it's definitely a team where
he played almost 32 minutes through 3 quarters. And
yeah, like
played it all in the fourth.
Right. If you get a fourth quarter here, there's a pretty good chance that you're getting like 38 minutes from Porter and Oladipo.
Right. So I guess that's what it comes down to. I mean, 2 guys potentially playing 38, 40 minutes in regulation. I'm willing to take some shots on DraftKings if they really are going to be as low owned as they are. But as you mentioned, the boom bust tool isn't in love with them. Gene Kim with the super chat, he said, had an 8K day on the day of return of Laffy and Adam combo. Let's go, brother. Coincidence? Question mark. I assume not. If I played 2
don't see how it would be.
What's up?
I said, I don't see how it would be.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. Thanks, by the way, Gene. He says, if I played 2 of Oladipo, Porter Jr., and Martin Jr., should I run it back with a Hawk? That's actually a really good question because stacking isn't that important. There's no real significant correlation. But when you're a team that gets blown out so often, Adam, sometimes, and I know you've talked about this, you'll say, listen, if I'm playing these 2 guys on, say, maybe Minnesota, I want to have the best player on the other team because the odds of this game blowing out are higher than most other situations.
I think it makes sense here for that reason. And also, and again, I'm not sure which site we're talking about, but on DraftKings, if you're playing like Oladipo plus Porter plus, who'd you say, KJ Martin?
Yeah.
You're allocating a lot of money to Houston there, and you basically need those guys to play really well, which means that the game is most likely competitive and that Hawks are getting their full run against a really bad Houston team. So it just increases the likelihood that someone like Trae Young or Clint Capella or Collins has a big game. So I typically don't set a rule like forcing that, but I do like setting it so that, if I have, let's say, both of Oladipo and Porter on DraftKings, it bumps the projection for Trae Young and for Clint Capella, for example. On FanDuel, I think that the pricing is much more favorable on all three of those guys. So again, I wouldn't set a rule saying that like I have to have one of the Atlanta guys, because I think that you could see Oladipo, Porter, and Martin all be some of the best point per dollar plays at their positions on FanDuel, even if nobody on Atlanta really goes off. But on FanDuel, you have such favorable pricing on Trae Young in particular that I think you're going to end up just rostering him a lot anyway. So it would make sense to just, have him in those lineups.
Top options from this game, either side.
Trae Young on FanDuel, either Capella or Collins, depending on Capella's status. From the Rocket side, Oladipo and Porter, regardless of site, they look better on FanDuel, and then KJ Martin on FanDuel also.
Okay. Let's go with New York and the Philadelphia 76ers. New York Knicks on the road against Philly are 7-point dogs. This one opened around 5.5, 6, 5.5 in some spots. 218 total. So pretty low total in this one. Elfrid Payton is doubtful. Derrick Rose is out. And Julius Randle, dude, just keeps proving himself as a bona fide elite fantasy option at this point. The question is, like, how do we reconcile this price point with what he's been doing in the box score, Adam? You know what I mean? It's been so tough to be like, yeah, God, he's almost 10K. He's priced only $700 less than Nikola Jokic or Luka Doncic, and then he drops off another 60 plus.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes down to the site that you're playing on too. Like on FanDuel, it ended up being really, really easy to get to him yesterday because of roster constraints, and you have to, roster X amount of guys at each position. It just ended up that based on how pricing was, it was really easy to plug in Randle because you didn't really have the option of saying, okay, well, I can just play Nikola Jokic instead. Whereas on DraftKings, it becomes a lot more difficult. One, because he's even more expensive at $9,900, but two, because there's just so much flexibility and so many different ways to construct your roster, the opportunity cost of your roster spots just becomes a little bit higher because, where it's like, oh, well, I can play Julius Randle. You can also just move him to center and play, on yesterday's slate, Jokic instead. So it's different between sites. I think once again, he'll be a lot easier to get into lineups on FanDuel than he will on DraftKings. Tough matchup against Philadelphia, but Embiid being out certainly does help the Knicks. And, Randall's just been great all year long. He plays huge minutes. He topped 40 minutes again yesterday. He's averaging about 1.3 fantasy points per minute, leads the team in usage, rebounding, and assist percentage. There's nothing negative to say about Randall. I will say that there's a power forward that we'll talk about later that I like a little bit more on this particular slate, but any amount of Randall you get to is perfectly fine because he's one of the highest upside plays on the slate.
What about quickly here? What do you make of yesterday's game where he wasn't bad. He ended up grabbing 33, almost 34 minutes, but in that same spot, you had Frank Ntilikina foul out in 16 minutes, of course, shot 0 for 5 because Frank Ntilikina does not actually make baskets in the NBA. But that's, by the way, it's amazing. 0 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, and 6 fouls.
And yeah, +5 for Ntilikina.
What's up?
He ended up being at +5 for the game.
Oh, well. That's good, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know.
Do you think that Thibodeau do you think we should be worried about that Ntilikina would have gotten more run and Tom Thibodeau would have done what he always does and pulled the rookie?
Yes and no. I think it's a concern in that there's no guarantee quickly plays 32 to 34 minutes. Like if Ntilikina's playing well or the unit's playing well with Ntilikina out there, Thibodeau's not likely to plant his flag with Emmanuel quickly and put him back in no matter what. But at the same time, on average, I think you're going to get 32 to 34 minutes because normally Ntilikina's not going to play that well. You can see that first half rotation where Ntilikina played a total of 5 minutes. I think that had the Knicks not gone on a little bit of a run in the fourth quarter with Ntilikina out there, quickly would have subbed back in sooner than he did. So on average, I think you're getting those minutes from quickly. It's just not a guarantee because, if Ntilikina is playing well, he can stay out there. But I do think that the minutes should be there for quickly. The salary is still reasonable. He came up a little bit on FanDuel to 5,200, but still a good price point there. In his minutes with Julius Randle on the floor this year, he still has a 25% usage rate. He still averaged about 1 fantasy point per minute. So I think he's still a good value. It's not the same great value it was on FanDuel yesterday at 4,600, but still I think, underpriced if you're assuming you're getting around 33 minutes of a fantasy point per minute.
See some people in chat talking about not having any interest in getting to Randall because of Ben Simmons' defense.
I mean, okay. It's just not the way I look at DFS.
Right. Like is Ben Simmons a great defender? Yeah, very good. Like, are we even guaranteed though that he's going to be locked on the Julius Randle all game?
Right, like he could be.
Could be
But
on quickly for all we know.
yeah, I mean, more often than not, team defense matters more, for DFS than individual defense. Pace matters. Like it's not something that I'm making a decision on rostering Julius Randle or not. Like the price point is a much bigger concern to me than Ben Simmons.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Julius Randle is just kind of a bruiser too. He'll back you down and make your life miserable. But I'm assuming, yeah, sure, if Ben Simmons is guarding him, he'll have a decent time doing so. And he actually only has 10 pounds on Simmons. But what are you doing with the rest of New York? Anything else here?
Not really. I do think RJ Barrett deserves a mention on Fanduel. He's 5,700 at small forward. Just another example of like 6,200 on Draftkings, even though the price isn't drastically different. I think he'll be more difficult to get to because there's so many interchangeable pieces. On Fanduel, though, you have to roster 2 small forwards. So you're assuming you're going to get 34, 35 minutes from Barrett. Maybe if you are someone that believes Ben Simmons is spending the entire game on Randle, that would benefit Barrett. But it's just, the playing time is pretty appealing. You can say the same thing for Reggie Bullock, 3,800 on DraftKings, played 41 minutes yesterday. It's a really appealing price point for someone that has the potential to play that many minutes. And I do think that his minutes are more solid because you don't have Rose, Rivers, or probably Elfrid Payton here. But you are still talking about a very low per minute producer in Bullock. If you get 36 minutes, he probably has a decent per minute or a decent point per dollar game, but it's pretty unlikely that he's someone that breaks the slate open.
Alex Kaiser, welcome to the team, fella. This is pretty incredible. Andrew Kang has just super chatted twice, right? But he super chatted to somebody else in the chat. I suppose just to get their attention.
I didn't even know you could do that.
He super chatted. No. Like it goes to us is the point.
Oh.
It goes to us, but he's just making statements to them. So I don't know, man. That's one way to get your voice heard. Pick up the microphone. Appreciate it, though, man. Thanks. I'm not reading those out loud, though. I'm not being the middleman for your conversation with Gene. Okay. On the Philly side, Josh and I had a pretty long conversation this morning about what to expect out of the center position, and it's a weird spot because last game they were up by a ton. They just smoked San Antonio. And Tony Bradley played a good amount of minutes in the first half of that game, and then only a few minutes in the second half, or 5 minutes and 41 seconds in the third quarter. Never returned in the blowout. But in the first half, he played 15 minutes in the first half. Now, I'm not projecting him for 30 minutes today, but do you think he closes if this game stays competitive?
I doubt it. My guess is that Dwight Howard closes.
See, I don't think he will.
You don't think Howard closes?
I don't think Howard closes, no.
I think you get like 22 minutes from Bradley, 26 from Howard.
Okay. See, I'm going the other way.
Yeah. So, I mean, he started 3 games this year. He's averaged 20 minutes per game. Obviously, like you said, blowouts involved. But I think that more often than not, you just are going to get, 3 stints out of Tony Bradley. So I still think that it makes him a good value. He's over a fantasy point per minute guy overall. He's averaged around the fantasy point per minute or just shy in the games that he has started this year. So I still do think he's a good value. He's minimum salary on FanDuel, which makes him, a minimum salary power forward rather. Sorry. So it makes him even more valuable there. The center position in general is not that strong tonight. So it's not really a problem getting to him on DraftKings. I think he's a good point per dollar play. I'd be surprised if he plays more minutes than Howard.
I think if Bradley doesn't close, it will be a smaller lineup without Howard or him.
Okay, that's reasonable too. I think if a center closes, it's Dwight Howard.
Okay, fair enough. Like what you could see, and Doc's done this a lot this year, is if you need to stop someone from scoring, he'll bring Matisse Thybulle out there,
right,
and he'll stick him on Emmanuel quickly, right? That's something you've seen. And outside of free throws, where he'll sub in some bigs, he'll go with a smaller lineup. Well, of course, Joel Embiid. But yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if you saw even like a Thybulle in a crunch time situation close this one out. But
yeah, I agree with that. When I said Howard, I guess I I basically meant not Tony Bradley.
If it's a center, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I think that you see like 21, 22 minutes from Bradley. And then if they play a center all 48 minutes, then the rest going to Howard. But it wouldn't be surprising if you got 21, 22 from Bradley, 22, 23 from Howard. And then you got a closing lineup where like you have Simmons on Randall, Harris on Noel, and like you said, Matisse Thybulle in on Quickly or something like that.
So where do you stand on these two centers outside of what we expect from the closing rotations and such? Tony Bradley's ownership right now is 22.7% projected ownership on DraftKings, and on FanDuel he is 26%. So he's getting some love.
Yeah, and I think on FanDuel it's totally different because he's minimum salary at power forward, but yeah, I think that he's a good point per dollar value. It's another one where I think that he's kind of unlikely to be someone that like you have to have, because again, I just think that he's playing 21, 22 minutes. If he plays 27 minutes, then you pretty much have to have him. But like right now, looking at the boom bust tool, we have him basically about where he should be, 23% ownership, 21% optimal lineup percentage. He gets you other stuff in your lineup that you really want to get to. So I think Tony Bradley's a really good play just from a point per dollar standpoint. I think that he's unlikely to, score 35 points or something, but I think he is one of the better projected values.
What about Ben Simmons and the rest of these options on Philly, given that Joel Embiid is out and he makes a huge impact being off the floor?
Yeah, Simmons' numbers are pretty crazy without Embiid. Actually, Simmons and Harris both. Their numbers this year in the games that they've played without Embiid, and it's been 5 or 6, I believe, are just drastically better than they were last year. Some of that I would assume is attributed to Doc Rivers. Some of it's probably a sample size thing. But you've seen Simmons play extremely well without Embiid. You've seen Harris with a 30% usage rate and averaging almost 1.4 fantasy points per minute in those games as well. So Harris on DraftKings, the salary's kind of gotten elevated just because he's played so many games recently without Simmons or Embiid. I think he's still a high upside play, but he doesn't stand out necessarily as one of the best options. On FanDuel, he's still a little bit cheaper than on DraftKings. He looks like a good value there. The only thing that'll be tough is on FanDuel, I think you have Harris stands out as being underpriced. Tony Bradley at power forward stands out as being underpriced. And then I really like Zion. So obviously you can only roster 2 of those guys, but and Randall. So you can only roster 2. The opportunity cost kind of high amongst that group, but I do think Harris looks good. Ben Simmons is only 8,200 on FanDuel, so he stands out as a really strong option there, I think. And then even on DraftKings at 9K, he has guard and forward eligibility, so you can roster him in like 5 different lineup spots. He's going to be someone that's really easy to get into lineups, and I think just looks like a good play. It doesn't hurt either that the Knicks have been playing a little bit faster lately and not quite as solidly defensively.
All right. Top options from either side?
Simmons, Harris, Bradley from the Philadelphia side, Randall Quickly from the Knicks side. Barrett's a good play on FanDuel too.
All right. Hey, for the next day and a half through the 17th, through St. Patrick's Day, we're running an awesome promo, 50% off the entire week at Awesemo Plus Platinum. Get everything on the site: ownership, player projections, top stack tool, boom or bust tool. Somebody said in chat earlier, like, oh, I wish I didn't sign up. They're giving away so much free stuff. We're really not at all. Like, if you come and check out the amount of tools we have, it's absurd. This is a small fraction a small fraction that we'll put up for non-users to see every day what it is. And quite frankly, if you're rotating it each day, you get the point. So Shamrock is the promo code, SHAMROCK. Gets you 50% off everything on the site. Like I said, all of those tools, even the lineup builder, if you're a single or 3 max player, the boomer bust tool, the top stack tool, which is going to be so clutch once we get to baseball. It's such an awesome tool for any sport where you stack. All of the premium articles and all of the tools built by the #1 DFS player in the world, Alex Baker, Awesemo himself. Check them all out. Go to awesemo.com/promos. Very simple way to check it out yourself. And if you do decide to sign up using the promo code Shamrock, I say this every time, right? Make sure to take advantage of every tool we have and every opportunity we have. And that includes our premium Slack chat, because we have office hours. And if you're a newer player or even not a newer player, but looking to fine tune your game, looking to make adjustments, make tweaks, well, we got some of the best players out there answering your questions in office hours, from Alex to Colts. You've seen him up top of a ton of leaderboards, I'm sure, to Adam, to Ben, to Josh, and so many more every single day, taking your questions. Sean's on, another guy that's just joined the team in office hours. Some great stuff. And every day, a premium YouTube video as well, that you have one of those guys on to help you out. So check it out, Shamrock, all access, everything for the week, 50% off. All right, let's keep it moving here. OKC and Chicago. The Oklahoma City Thunder are 6.5-point dogs, 225 total. What are we doing with the Thunder, given that we are dealing with a lot of injuries? Horford out, Baisley out, and then Dort and Teo Maledon also questionable.
Yeah, so this is one spot where we're waiting not only on injury news, but also on what the lineup actually is going to look like. Teo Maledon not on the 5:30 injury report, so he should be available, but Lou Dort still questionable. Last game, and Svi Mikhailuk is available to play tonight as well. He wasn't there last game. So there are still minutes available here, not quite as shorthanded as they were against Memphis last time. My guess at the starting lineup, if Dort plays, is that it's Gilgeous-Alexander, Teo Maledon, Dort, Boguszewski, and Moses Brown, with Isaiah Roby coming off the bench. That obviously could change, but assuming that that's the starting lineup, I think that you're looking at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander clearly, being the leader in terms of usage and assist percentage and fantasy production. He's pretty expensive at 8,800 on DraftKings, but he's 8K on Fanduel, which looks like a pretty good price tag. Behind him, you can look to some of these guys for value. It's just that I think it's risky, and some of their prices have come up a little bit. Boguszewski played 39 minutes last game. I think it's more likely with bodies coming back that you get around 30 minutes from him, probably getting around 0.8 to 0.85 fantasy points per minute. Definitely a decent value, but doesn't stand out as necessarily my favorite value amongst the power forwards. Moses Brown on both DraftKings and FanDuel really, but 3,500 on DraftKings, 4,200 on FanDuel. But remember, on FanDuel, Tony Bradley's not a center, so you don't have the other, another really strong value center. Moses Brown played about 25 minutes last game. He did deal with pretty significant foul trouble, though. Picked up his 5th foul in the 3rd quarter. I think potentially you could see a couple more minutes from him. He doesn't have a long track record of playing in the NBA, but he has been productive when he has. He's averaged about a fantasy point per minute when he's played alongside Gilgeous-Alexander, only 28 minutes of that this year. With just in general, though, 1.25 fantasy points per minute for his career. So he's someone that has produced well. He's really cheap. You're probably getting like 26 minutes from him. So Brown stands out as a good value. And then Isaiah Roby played 33 minutes last game. I'm expecting you get 26 to 28 off the bench tonight. 5,300 on DraftKings, I think, is going to be pretty tough to get to. 4,700 on FanDuel, a little bit easier. But again, he's competing with Tony Bradley, Harris, Randall, Zion. So still, I think, going to be pretty tough to prioritize.
Okay. So I'm just pulling up ownership here real quickly on OKC. See if we have any recent updates. The Moses Brown ownership is actually, believe it or not, Adam, come down from earlier in the day. It was like 70% earlier on DraftKings. He's at 56.5 right now. And then on FanDuel, SGA is at 37.3. Just to kind of condense this a little bit and make it easier for people out there watching, on DraftKings and FanDuel, what are your top options? And are you going to be going off not off the reservation, but are you going to come in underweight on any of these really high-owned guys for that exact reason?
So, I mean, I'm playing cash tonight, so no, okay. But even in tournaments, like
would you?
Right. That's like, even looking in tournaments, looking at the boom bust tool, the way things sit right now, I most likely would just eat it with Moses Brown, because there's not really a lot of options down there that have a similar range of outcomes. And one thing I know Alex has talked about too is, like, if you look at the boom bust tool on DraftKings right now, we have Moses Brown at 56% ownership and 47% chance of being in the optimal lineup. That says that he's, it shows that he's overowned, but there's still an almost 50% chance of him being in the optimal lineup. So it all just comes back to, you have to be able to find guys. You have to fill out an entire lineup. So you have to be able to find some guys that have a good chance at being in the optimal and are cheap enough that they allow you to get really high upside guys into your lineup. So just the fact that, Moses Brown really stands out in terms of chances of being in the top lineup means that I would most likely prefer to be taking some shots at lower owned mid-range and expensive guys than trying to find some $3,500 guy that is going to average over a fantasy point per minute and play 26 minutes or something. So I think I'd still just be going to Moses Brown in most of my lineups. Boguszewski and Roby, I think, are a lot more questionable. They're also getting less ownership, though, obviously. As far as top plays go, on DraftKings, I think it's Moses Brown. On FanDuel, I think it's Gilgeous-Alexander and Moses Brown.
So Daniel House is out. Christian Wood out as well. We expected that. Rockets starting Porter Jr. at the point, Oladipo, Sterling Brown, Jayshawn Tate, and Justin Patton. Just to backtrack for a minute here, since we're getting this information, I'm still waiting. Have you seen anything on McLemore?
No, I haven't. So if McLemore plays, they have 9. If McLemore doesn't play, they have 8 by my count.
So he started last game, and he's not starting this game. Do you think that might signify?
He didn't start last game. They had the same starting lineup last game.
Oh, I'm sorry. On the 12th, he started. My fault. 2 games ago, he started. Yep. So what do you think?
Still questionable. Yeah,
but why wouldn't they just give us that damn news now if we already got it on House?
I mean, I'm guessing maybe it's like a, going to go through workout type thing.
Yeah. Guess we'll figure that out. It's an 8 p.m. lock, which is good because you have 4 games locking at 8, 1 at 7:30, which for all intents and purposes, if you want to ignore that one between Utah and Boston, you can, and then you'll have that news in time. So stay tuned for more info there. Right now, that's really all we have. So what are you doing with the Bulls against the Thunder here?
Yeah, this is one where I don't think there's any one particular guy that stands out, but I do think that there are some spots that look pretty appealing in tournaments. Actually, I take that back. Tomas Satoransky on DraftKings at 3,600 stands out. But outside of that, you have Zach LaVine, whose salaries come down a little bit. He's down to $9K on DraftKings. Thaddeus Young started and only played 22 minutes last game, but I think more often than not, you're going to get 27, 28 minutes out of him. Lauri Markkanen's price looks pretty appealing. 6K on DraftKings, 5,500 on FanDuel. He's, around the fantasy point per minute guy that has averaged 30 and a half minutes per game this year. So I think that on average, you're getting around 31 fantasy points from him. So a little bit cheaper than he probably should be. I can see getting to any of LaVine, Young, Markkanen in tournaments. Satoransky at 3,600 on DraftKings played about 25 and a half minutes last game. About a minute and a half of that was garbage time. I expect that you're getting around 24 minutes from him. On FanDuel, I don't really want to use the point guard position on him because I think there's enough value elsewhere. But on DraftKings at 3,600, I think if you're going to get another 24 minutes from Satoransky, he's one of the better point per dollar options.
Okay. Is that all you got for Chicago?
Yeah, just mixing in some Markkanen, Young, and LaVine in tournaments. Satoransky on DraftKings, I think, looks like a really useful piece.
All right. Hey, let's get that thumbs up north of 500, please. That would be fantastic. And yeah, people in chat talking about the NBA 2K stream. Josh mentioned it this morning. This is the anniversary of the first NBA 2K simulation stream. That started at Awesemo. We started seeing it everywhere else, but that started at Awesemo, and it was awesome. And I know so many of you guys were here with us through that craziness at the beginning of COVID, not having a fucking clue what was going on and sitting back and winning prizes, winning money, watching an NBA 2K sim stream and Harrison Barnes rip off 30 points in the fourth quarter. Those were good times. I miss it. Maybe one day we'll bring it back. We won't. Like, the infrastructure it took to set all that up in a week was insane, and it was a massive scramble, but I don't regret any of it. So we had some good times. It's crazy, Adam, to think that am I nuts, or does it feel crazy that it's been a full calendar year since all of that started?
Yeah,
not just the sim, but COVID in general.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I was thinking about it the other day because that's pretty much, I had moved out. I left my apartment to move back to my mom's and help her out, thinking I'd be there for like a month. And then I just moved back to my apartment like a month ago. So yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. Like a year ago, I was getting out of here.
Crazy, man. Crazy. Yeah, we love you too, WS. It was a damn good time. Josh says Barnacle of the Bay. Yeah, that was fantastic.
You guys did a good job setting that up while I was sitting around my house doing absolutely nothing.
New Orleans. I've mentioned that Tom. I've even mentioned this to Tom. Like I was at least 5 drinks deep by the time each one of those shows started.
Yeah, I think around that time is when I was staying up till 6 a.m. watching Ozark and drinking like 4 bottles of wine every night.
And playing KBO.
Yep, yeah, I'm playing KBO.
Oh, I don't envy that at all. New Orleans and Portland. We got 2 games to go here. But by the way, guys, No House Advantage is doing a $50 match deposit bonus on your first deposit today if you download the app. No House Advantage, $50 deposit bonus if you download the app and sign up and deposit today. Very cool site, peer-to-peer player props, contest, tournament form, and the best part, not just the 50% bonus, the best part is that we have the projections on the site, and we have the optimal lineups tool on the site for free for No House Advantage. So if you sign up there, be sure to exploit those tools, not just a bonus, exploit the tools. Very cool format. All player props put into a contest form. So it's not like you're just betting single props on one of these books. You're throwing into a GPP style. You're getting the tools to make it work. And the best part, well, another best part is they're static. So if a prop comes out earlier in the day, it doesn't change throughout the day, depending on how much money comes in, depending whether or not a book takes it off and puts it back up, it's exactly the same. So if you think you're sharp enough, I think a lot of you guys are, and you want to exploit the tools and get the $50, download the No House Advantage app, sign up today, sponsor of the Deeper Dive. All right, Adam, New Orleans and Portland, we got 2 to go here, so let's wrap this up. Pels 1.5-point dogs. Total opened at around 242. It's down to 238, but what do you do with the Zions and the Ingrams today?
Yeah, I mean, this is a game that should have a lot of points. And I think Zion in particular really stands out at his current price point. He's 8,700 on Draftkings. On Fanduel, he's 8,400. Zion's been good all season long, but he's really taken a step forward recently. Usage rate is up. Assist percentage is up, which is a really big thing to see. I know you and I have talked a lot about his peripherals or lack thereof this season, but over the first 2 months of the season, he had about a 28.5% usage rate, about a 13% assist percentage. Since then, so it's a little over a month now, he's got a 31.5% usage rate. His assist percentage is up between 19 and 20%. He's averaging well over 1.3 fantasy points per minute. So it sets up in as a really good matchup here. Also, Portland is allowing the most offensive rebounds per game in the NBA. And while there's, talk about Zion not being a great rebounder, but he's 15th in the NBA in offensive rebounds per game this year, despite not being, only averaging about 7 rebounds, total rebounds per game. So I think in that regard, it sets up as a really good matchup for him as well. Really, really like Zion here. Ingram's a good play too. 7,700 on FanDuel is a really strong option at small forward. 8,100 on DraftKings. I mentioned earlier, Jaylen Brown's, maybe a little bit underpriced despite the matchup. Brandon Ingram for 200 more, I would rather get there in this matchup. And then one other salary that stands out is Eric Bledsoe, 5,200 on DraftKings and 5K on FanDuel. Only 0.78 fantasy points per minute over the last month, but averaging about 29 minutes per game. And you're just getting this game with a massive total, lead, highest total in the slate by about 10 points. So I think Bledsoe and also Josh Hart at that same price point are guys that could just kind of be used to round out your lineups.
Okay. On the Portland side, CJ McCollum making a long-awaited return. It's been 2 months, exactly 2 months since he's last played, which means that Damian Lillard at 10-8 on DraftKings, a little bit pricey there. But I was actually, I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, right? Because he was at 15% earlier. He's down to 9.5% now. But do you think just the overall environment of this game makes Dame a viable play, even though McCollum's returning? And given that it was a foot injury, do you think he's going to be pretty heavily limited anyway today?
So as long as it's at low ownership, basically everything I said about Jimmy Butler earlier can be applied to Damian Lillard here. Sure. It's a very similar thing. And if you remember that
Macklemore game time decision, by the way, so we still don't have info on that.
And Bam Adebayo, no minutes limit, but short stints. Whatever that means. If you remember,
he's on a minutes limit,
right? If you remember that week-long stretch where Damian Lillard was low owned and scored 80 fantasy points for a week last year, that was right after CJ McCollum came back from an injury. That's why none of the good DFS players were rostering Lillard, and then he was scoring 80 points and everyone was complaining about it. So the point there being that the upside is still there with CJ McCollum. It's still Damian Lillard. It's still a good matchup. He's just very clearly overpriced to be playing, some set of his minutes alongside McCollum. You have Damian Lillard $1,100 more expensive than Trae Young on FanDuel with McCollum back. On DraftKings, he's $600 more, and he's a lot more expensive than pretty much every other guard. So he is overpriced, but as long as he's at low ownership, it's still a spot where the ceiling is there.
It's definitely there. And we've seen it even with McCollum playing. Lillard's thrown up 80 fantasy point games on a number of occasions, and this is the highest total on the slate. Sure, it came down, but it's still at 238. Is there anything else you like for Portland?
Cantor's salary on Fanduel stands out at 6,200. Again, I think optimal builds you're going to be paying down probably and going to Moses Brown. But I do think that Cantor only has about a 17% usage rate as a starter anyway. So I don't think McCollum being back should really hurt him there. He should still be able to rebound and, give you a pretty solid game at 6,200.
All right. Ready to wrap this one up?
Yep.
All right. By the way, love seeing all the YouTube members, by the way. And no, there's no paywall on YouTube. It's just a cool thing that we thought would be fun to do. That if you join us every single day, you get a badge, you make yourself known by joining and becoming a member here on the Awesemo YouTube channel. It's a fun idea. Plus with NFTs, exclusivity is a thing these days, right, man? You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Let's finish it with the Lakers and Minnesota. Lakers were 9-point favorites. Let's move to 7.5. I'm wondering what I don't know about this one now.
So I think that the Lakers are an interesting team here because LeBron obviously is a good play always, but this is a good matchup against Minnesota. You also just don't have a lot of top end talent on the slate. So a lot of times with LeBron, it's like, well, the ceiling's not quite as high as Luka or Jokic or whoever. Those guys aren't playing today. So LeBron looks a lot better. You also have Alex Caruso out again, which gives you Talen Horton-Tucker at 3,600 on Draftkings. I think 3,700 shooting guard on Fanduel. Played like 12 and a half first half minutes last game, finished with like 28 minutes, including garbage time. So I think Horton-Tucker looks like a good value here. It's someone that's averaged about a fantasy point per minute this year. Beyond those two, you can look to Harrell, you can look to Schroeder in tournaments. They don't stand out quite as much as LeBron and Horton-Tucker do, I don't think.
All right, so go ahead and just that's it. But close this game out on both sides. I know there's not a ton to talk about.
Yes, that's mostly it. Karl Anthony Towns obviously is a high upside option. Not a great matchup against the Lakers, but no Anthony Davis makes it a little bit better. Towns has averaged about 1.3 DraftKings points per minute so far in the games without Russell, without Beasley. I think that number goes up a little bit as you get a larger sample, as you get Towns kind of getting his legs back under him and all that. But I still don't think I think he's more of a luxury than a necessity on this particular slate.
All right, guys, that'll do it for us. Always a great time hanging out with you every day. Adam and I, of course, will be back with you tomorrow and then again on the next day, and we'll just run this back every day until the season's over. Remember, hit that thumbs up. We're not at 500. Come on, 475, almost at 500. About to turn this one over to our boy Chris Spags and Terry McBride. Remember, Shamrock, 50% off your first week of Awesemo Plus. It's good until the end of tomorrow. Awesemo.com/promos. Follow Adam at Ship My Money DFS, myself at Lafayette_D, especially if you like talking Top Shots and DFS. I mean, what better world is there at this point? And we'll see you back here tomorrow. Good luck tonight, guys. Later, boys.
What's up? Look at this.
I didn't get a show of Josh, so I got to use
money
it
covered. That is awesome.
And ownership projections are free today too, so I don't even know. I guess that's why I'm wearing it, to show the savings involved.
Oh, that is killer. We got to cut in Ted DiBiase's intro music with that. Everybody's got a price.
I think that would get us copyright struck.
Maybe. Take your time. Yeah. It's not like all the way in the background of this one, like a gospel choir. Something back there. I like this one.
What is up, everyone? It's that time. 1 hour left to lock on DraftKings and Fanduel. We also have a bonus half hour today. No House Advantage is going to give you as much money as I have on this suit today with their deposit bonus on there for new customers. $50 free at No House Advantage. We'll talk about that in a second, but I'm Chris Spags, joined by a man who's responsible for all of our customer success at Awesemo.com. You know him, you love him. He's Terry McBride. How are you doing, Terry?
I'm feeling suddenly underdressed and just like I'm way off the franchise here. I didn't realize we were going this all out with the Ted DiBiase costume today.
Well, a little inside baseball here where our pal Laffy came back. Congratulations, of course, to him and his family for a beautiful baby girl in their lives. And yesterday, I was supposed to do a live before lock show with our pal Josh Engelman. And I don't know why I just saw this online and thought, what a good way to troll Josh in a way that's going to break his brain for 15 minutes of the show. And then the show got moved because the schedule being moved around. So you're the lucky recipient, Terry. You are the winner of my money suit.
Yeah, I'm happy about it. I don't know how Josh would have reacted to it, but like this made my day. So I'm good, man. That's killer.
I feel like a car salesman or a car dealership owner who's like trying to get people in the door right now, maybe spinning a sign too, but we're here for you guys. And the good news for all of you out there, a couple quick plugs up top. The ownership projections at awesemo.com are free today. So it is money time for you without spending a single cent. So go to awesemo.com right now. Check out the ownership projections up top on there. You can find those. And that promo at No House Advantage, another big one for you guys. If you use the promo code Awesemo at No House Advantage, you can get a $50 deposit match on your first deposit if you're a new member on there. So go over there. We're going to talk about them, have a special half-hour show coming up today, reviewing some of the best No House Advantage props on that site. It's peer-to-peer prop betting along the lines of a DFS tournament. You rank your favorite props for the day from 10 points to 1, and you can win money at No House Advantage. So go ahead, go over to nohouseadvantage.com or download them in the App Store and use that promo code Awesemo to get a $50 deposit match. And the last plug, this honestly should have been the reason I wore the money suit, was this Shamrock promo is going away tomorrow. It celebrates St. Patrick's Day, also to give you guys access to our new or an improved college basketball product, our March Madness product, just in time for that. So go to awesemo.com/join. Check out the Awesemo Plus weekly membership for half off your week. So go to awesemo.com/join. Use the promo code Shamrock right now. All right, Terry, we've gotten all the silliness out of the way. We've gotten the plugs out of the way. So tell me, what is the most important injury situation to you on today's slate, where we do have some value out there? We do have some plays that maybe people are questioning, but what is the most important one to you right now?
Honestly, I mean, we've got the huge injury in Philly that we know kind of how that's going to shape the slate. We've got some guys out in OKC that I think make, guys like Moses Brown, who I didn't think we would be talking about necessarily all year. I think he's very, very interesting tonight. So I think that would probably be my spot, would be that OKC lineup. It's just really, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander thrust into extreme relevancy on FanDuel. Moses Brown, extremely relevant on DK. Pretty relevant on FanDuel as well. So he's right there with like Tony Bradley in terms of providing a big man value play. So I like both of those spots as far as, critical injury news for us for sure.
And Moses Brown to me seems like one of those, we always hesitate to say the word locks, but some plays, when you look at the projections, you look at the projection that Awesemo has for Moses Brown today, 28.5 fantasy points for him. I feel like this spot for Moses Brown is one that, you could sort your lineups out. You could even limit the exposure for Moses, but I think for him, he would pop up at 100% of my lineup. So that's how I'm treating him today. He's been a 1.2 fantasy point per minute guy on the year. He did have some foul trouble last game that limited him in both the first half and had him fouling out at the end of the game. So I think in this spot against Chicago, a team who's not afraid of missing a few shots here and there, I don't mind Moses here in the hopes that he gets there with some easy putbacks, offensive rebounding, also something he does well. I feel like Moses is a rare, cheap value play that I think the minutes seem secure, Terry. And I guess my question to you would be, on FanDuel and DraftKings, is it a different proposition for you, or are you willing to go heavy on him on both sites?
I am. Usually that's one where, sometimes we see those guys who are extreme value plays not necessarily line up quite the same with just one center on FanDuel. It's not really the case with him today. He's coming up a little bit less optimal than some of the other options. Or actually, no, last time I think I checked, he was still leading the position. He's just at a lower optimal number cross site. Let me sort to that. And yeah, so he's still leading the position at the center spot, despite not being nearly the best player, with a guy like Karl Anthony Towns on the board, Clint Capella on the board, Dwight Howard getting minutes. So there's some good options at center, but he outstrips them all. He's got a better boom score from Alex on both sites. So I would be heavy on him on both sites. You're getting a better leverage number on him on FanDuel, where not as many people are going to him, and it's closer to his optimal lineup appearance rate. It's still slightly negative, but it's much closer to even. On DK, you're getting him at heavy negative leverage. But Adam was just talking about this on the last show, and that's one of those plays. And I think he might have been talking about Tony Bradley at the time, but they hold up either way. That's one of those plays where you see a number like 55% ownership on a guy, and you start to say, all right, I'm going to have to go somewhere else, because we always talk so much about being different than the field. That's a guy who's more building block. When you see that he's going to be optimal at least around 50% of the time, a boom score, a ceiling score around 50% of the time, that's a guy to me who's more building block. We can get away with riding that negative leverage and just eating the chalk on him because of what he allows us to do at some of these other spots and what he opens up for your overall constructions. So it's just about everything else that he helps you access. So yeah, he's very much in play on both sides.
So another popular play was a value play recently while starting for the Thunder. And guys, smash that like button too. I'm sitting here looking like an asshole for the 5 seconds of amusement that people get from this. And quite frankly, money suits don't come cheap if you're surprised by that. So smash that like button, guys. It'd be great if you got us to 1,000 likes, but the ownership projections are free today. So you don't have to do that. No peer pressure, but go check them out on the site right now. Of course, we'll be talking about them throughout the course of the entire show. So Poku, Alexei Pokusevski, boy, I haven't had to say that full name out loud. So that's why everybody calls him Poku. But Poku had a monster game over the weekend for the Thunder. He's really also one thing that jumps out to me, shooting so terribly from the floor but shooting still unabashedly for the most part. He's actually had a higher usage rate in lineups with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in court time with no Horford and no George Hill. So it's not a spot that he's a low usage guy coming in and you expect him to drop off. He shoots unabashedly. He misses a lot of shots, which I think screams positive regression for him too. And we've seen a gigantic ceiling from him, Terry, but the price is up now. I don't think you can just pin him into lineups like Moses Brown, who's so cheap that I find it hard to believe he totally kills your lineup. I think the other parts of that are really going to be what decide if you're cashing or not, whether Brown has a big day or he doesn't. With Poku, though, at his price on DraftKings and on Fanduel, where you got to give away one of the value positions on there, do you feel like he's worth a lot of ownership too, or is the price being up maybe giving you a little more apprehension about going him heavy?
Yeah, that's one where I would probably look to get a little bit below the field. I would take what I got of him in certain shares and hope the process got me there, which it should. That's typically how it's driven. Negative leverage on both sites. And he's one where he's not coming up nearly as optimal as Moses Brown, like we were just talking about. So he's one where even slighter negative leverage, where we're talking about a -4 on FanDuel and -6 on DK, as compared to the -9 on DK that we had on Moses Brown. That -6 for a guy like Poku is
it's impossible. It's just really those names.
We have
to get our reps in, our 10,000 hours saying Pokusevski over and over again.
You guys should be playing hockey with that name. You should see me on that show. Anywho, I just think we get to a point where he's only coming up like 12% optimal and owned like 18% of the time. So you're not getting that half the time he's going to be in the optimal lineup kind of a performance out of him, kind of a projection out of him. I do like the fact that he can flex around the board on DK, but I just think he's a little overowned for what we can expect from him. So I would look to duck beneath the field on both sites on him.
And the last guy I really find important for Oklahoma City, again, they're going against Chicago, who we know plays reasonably fast, plays reasonably poor defense, all things that bode well for opponents for the most part. Obviously, OKC is disappointed in comparable spots before. But Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is just a guy who this year I think is kind of criminally underappreciated. 63% true shooting on the year, upwards of 35% usage depending upon who's in and out of this Thunder lineup. And today you don't have Bazley, you still don't have Diallo. Obviously, he's been traded. You have no Al Horford due to rest, still no George Hill. This spot to me does seem like one where Shai could have a ceiling day. And I know Shai's ceiling days have been definitely hard to pin down, probably as hard as anybody in the league. But in this spot, Terry, I feel like I want to get pretty heavy on Shai. He's going to be decently owned on FanDuel and DraftKings, but I still got above him on both sites, or above that number on both sites. Where are you landing with Shai, and do you find him to be somebody that you also want to either be with the field or above it?
The crunch that just finished while you were running through that intro, 500 lineups using my projections. I expect they'll be fairly the same as Alex's when it comes up. He is the top owned player in this crunch. So I will have a ton of them. That's on FanDuel. I would like them just as much on DK. Maybe I would get to a little bit less just because there's an ability to move different pieces around the board on that site, and he's more expensive relative to a lower cap. But I really like the player, the spot, the opportunity that he's got today. You mentioned everybody that's going to be out of this lineup. His usage jumps. It goes from 27.9 to a 32.1 just as of these recent lineup structures. So sees a little bit more opportunities to shoot. His assist rate comes down a little bit, but I don't think it's anything concerning. I think it's more happenstance than anything else. The fantasy production should be right there. I like the spot. I think he's a little underpriced at 8K as a shooting guard on FanDuel. And I think the position, the value that he provides at that spot on that site gives him a ton of utility, a ton of value in building out optimal lineups. So I'm all over Shai for sure tonight. I've been with it throughout the season. He's been coming up a lot for me when he's in and then getting to a lot of the OKC guys when he's out and, earlier in the season. I don't know that it's worked out well for me, but it's process, and I'm going right back to it. And that's just kind of how we have to be. Just keep blinders on.
Yeah, Shea's one of those guys who pops up a lot for me too when there are other Thunder players missing. And I think for me, the situation is that I will do like Terry's saying, you got to trust the data, trust the guys eventually going to have that ceiling. And I think this spot, besides maybe playing Sacramento or Washington, I feel like those are really two others that jump to mind. But playing Chicago is probably going to be as good of a situation for him to get going to do what he needs to do today. So Shea to me seems like a guy to at least be with the field on. And if you're willing to dive off the deep end potentially with Shea, I think going over on DraftKings and FanDuel both looks pretty appealing. In this game too, Terry, we have one value play who's going to be decently owned on DraftKings. I don't find him to be as viable on FanDuel, but maybe you feel differently. But Tomas Satoransky going to be projected for over 30% ownership on DraftKings today. Another top value play, I would say, alongside Moses Brown, though, comes with maybe a bit more risk in as much as you could definitely use usage and possessions or lose that rather. The Zach LaVine to also closing time to Kobe White does seem like last game, Kobe White was the one who was going to close that one before it got out of hand. Then they brought back in Tomas Satoransky for about a minute and a half of run. But overall, still 24 minutes for Tomas Satoransky. I don't mind the spot. Oklahoma City's defense, certainly not good. I think also certainly worse with all the guys they have out. Are you feeling Tomas Satoransky today? Do you find him viable on FanDuel as well as DraftKings?
Like him a lot better on DraftKings. 3,600, much better price than the 42 we're paying to get to him at the point on FanDuel. I think he's in play on FanDuel. He's got a decent appearance rate in the optimal lineups. We can compare that to the other point guards that are available on the slate right now. So I'll take a look at that. But overall, I don't love paying that price for a player like that. So I don't know how much I would get to him on FanDuel, but I think the 3,600 just has a ton of utility on DraftKings where you can kind of move him around. So let's see. 14.9% optimal on FanDuel ranks him as the 5th highest point guard. So he's definitely in play. But I would rather go to a Ricky Rubio. You're spending $1,000 more, but I think you get a lot more out of that. You could play the leverage game, the ownership game in dropping down to Satoransky, but you're taking on more risk in doing that than I'm overly comfortable with in like a big majority of lineups. I would definitely do it as a pivot in some, but he's not one of the core plays on FanDuel. I think he is that on DK. This is only sorted right now by the guys who are point guard eligible on FanDuel. I can try and add in the other guys real quick. No, I can't. He is the highest optimal point guard on DK by a wide margin. There might be a couple stragglers in here, but overall, just that price that you're paying, I think he's another guy that's more fundamental building block than he is anything you have to worry about skipping over or fading. He doesn't have to do a lot, and he's a 0.87 DraftKings point per minute guy this year. If he gets near that 26.5 minute mark that we've got, he should be fine, at least not kill you. If he gets more run than that, he gets a little bit of closing run again, they're getting blown out, something like that, he could put a ceiling game on that salary.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm as well. I think on FanDuel, he'll be fine. I think really if you're going him on FanDuel, it's because you're just really paying down the position, trying to get away from that Ben Simmons chalk. I guess also Damian Lillard, Trae Young going to have some ownership on there. But I agree. I think on DraftKings, he's a guy that opens up a lot of the players you're going to want to get to tonight. So to me, I don't mind giving away the point guard spot. It would be nice if you're a point guard, shooting guard. But really the one risk is just Kobe White taking those closing minutes and then Tomas Satoransky not being productive enough in the time before that. But he is a guy I went through the rate data pretty thoroughly to make sure I wasn't jumping entirely off the cliff here, but he actually does assist more with Zach LaVine on the floor with him. And I think that bodes well for him because, going next to a guy like Zach LaVine, he can be a black hole at times. And Tomas Satoransky, I think you would worry about that being an issue, but it seems to me like he's more driving the possessions and probably setting up better shots for LaVine besides the possessions he's killing himself. So I feel comfortable getting to Sato today, and we'll see how it goes. Sato and Moses Brown, two core plays for me. Smash that like button, guys. We're going to keep talking through the rest of the slate. And I think we've hit on some of the DraftKings top owned plays, but I want to talk about Ben Simmons for FanDuel because that's really a spot to me, that price point for him, the positionality on there at point guard. I feel like it's a really nice spot to build around Ben Simmons on FanDuel, Terry. Is he a priority play for you, or do you view maybe Tobias Harris? I know people are curious about Tony Bradley on both sides today. Is it Simmons or is it somebody else popping up the most for you for the Sixers against the Knicks?
Definitely getting to a good amount of Simmons. I'll give you the exact numbers. Let's see. This one's still running with Alex's just finished. Across 500 lineups using Alex's projections for FanDuel, I got 43% Ben Simmons. So getting a ton of Ben Simmons. I think he looks spectacular in the spot. I wrote him up this afternoon in my column. Pretty much everything I said in there I think holds up. Sometimes we get changes throughout the day. But let's see. Taking a look at all situations this season, he's at 20.3% usage. He's not a massive usage guy for, the caliber of player he is. Without Embiid on the floor, only making that change, he jumps to 23.7%. His fantasy points per minute jumps from 1.2 to 1.26. So he gains a decent amount with Embiid there off the floor. And we've seen him play, some spectacular games. The one concern would be, they've been a little bit worse recently and a little bit faster, but the Knicks play decent defense, don't play at the league's fastest pace by any means. So that would be the one concern, but I'm getting to a very big amount of Simmons. I just think 8,200 is a great price on him. It's a broken price on FanDuel at the point guard spot. 9,000 on DK. He's a lot less relevant. He's a mix and match, everybody drink option on that site. That's the new thing apparently. So I like the idea that we can flex him between point guard and small forward on DK, but I think the price just makes him more of just an also ran kind of an option over there. I would take what I got of him, but I wouldn't go out of my way to get to him on DraftKings.
I'm a little more bullish on him on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I found him impossible to avoid. On DraftKings, I think it's more of a luxury play here. I want to get more than double the field on him. He's only 12% projected owned on DraftKings. Again, ownership projections are free if you're just tuning in, so go check him out at awesemo.com. Check the top tab on there. You should be able to find him. And if you're having an issue, maybe give yourself a hard refresh because sometimes it can cash up, but should be good to go for everybody else out there. And Simmons to me on DraftKings, I feel like the price point works with the value that we have out there. I do think the rates to me are jumped out as a little more appealing. Tobias Harris had the big game last time out, but he's a usage monster type guy. I think that's going to happen. I think in this spot, I could see Simmons creating a little bit more for guys against the Knicks defense that does play a little bit slow, does make it a little bit clogged up. And, it could certainly, you can make the narrative the other way that, Tobias is going to have to find his shot more. But I think you lean on Simmons to create a bit more in this spot where you're probably going to see defenders really trying to cramp Tobias Harris's style a little bit more. I don't mind Tobias Harris. I'll be with the field on him too, only 10% for him. But Simmons was a guy on DraftKings I wanted to get above the field on, and on FanDuel too, I think he's definitely unavoidable for all the reasons that Terry mentioned. On the Knicks side, I feel like we have to talk about this too as well. Still an Emmanuel quickly chalk day after he was disappointing yesterday. Played a lot of minutes, shot 6 for 19. So hard to have a ceiling day when you're shooting under 33%, Terry. But I think in this spot, going back to quickly makes sense. Going to Philadelphia, a tough defense, but definitely a bit worse without Embiid in the mix. Ben Simmons, I don't think he's going to be dispatched to shut down Emmanuel quickly. So to get ahead of anybody who's worried about that one-on-one Simmons defense, I don't think it matters too much for Quickly or Randall. I think you'll probably see him spread it around a little bit to try to help out whoever's going to need help more. But this next team, Terry, who is your favorite as well? Who is your favorite DFS player tonight who can crush your heart perhaps in real life and fantasy at once?
Boy, you know the Knicks well. I think Quickly is very relevant on both sites. You hit the nail on the head. It's going to be about his scoring. He needs the ball to go down to produce. He's not the greatest facilitator in the world. He's on the floor to jack up threes and hit that little floater and help spread the floor a little bit and really make things happen. He makes a lot of their offense flow when he is out there. He's a phenomenal rookie. He's been playing really, really well, but he's going to have those rookie games. He's going to have those clunky shooting games. And when he doesn't get the ball to go down, it's going to hurt him overall for fantasy. So that's what happened to us last night. I still think for 5,200 at the shooting guard on FanDuel, for 58 between point guard and shooting guard on DK, he's almost unavoidable on both sites. He's coming up 40% optimal basically on both. He's going to be owned, but the ownership is such that it's right in line with his optimal rates. So I think it's a spot again where we can press beyond the field, get to a third again as much, half as much, double the field if you want to go all the way up to like 80%. You're taking on some risk like we did yesterday with him, but I think you're getting a tremendous play there. It's all about what else it enables, as we talk about a lot with some of these positions. On the FanDuel side, I definitely think that Julius Randle is very interesting again, and he's not getting owned quite as much as he should be. He's going to be popular, but not quite to the point where we're getting him in our simulations for the optimal lineup. Playing spectacular basketball, 1.22 fantasy points per minute, just doing everything right for the Knicks this year. Just really, really an emergent season for him. And I think we can play some RJ Barrett as well. Not springing to the top of the board by any means, but he's in that mid-range and he doesn't cost much. Salary's all the way down to 5,700 now. So we saw him come out of relevance when his salary went up and his minutes came down. Now his minutes are back kind of in play and his salary's back down. So I think he's back on the board for us. Kid could put up a decent rebounding game, and every time he goes off scoring, he has a pretty relevant fantasy game. So I think he's in play for us too.
Yeah, Randall, I just want to say I agree with you on FanDuel and DraftKings too. I think, the $9,900 price tag doesn't look the best, but I think he's just under that 5X value mark where I don't mind taking the stabs just to get, honestly, just discounted ownership in the hopes that Randall has a day. And I know people too will, I saw in the YouTube chat earlier during the deeper dive, talking about Julius Randle being angry. And he definitely was angry with not getting that call at the end of the game yesterday against Brooklyn and throwing chairs around. And this is the kind of spot where it wouldn't shock me to see Randall come out a little more aggressive, not something that you can account for data-wise. But if it means that I'm getting more of him anyway, and I think I can feel better about getting more than the field on a guy who's honestly a bit overpriced, but we all know the ceiling at this point. I expect Julius Randle, he might not have an outlier day. Maybe he gets outscored by somebody else in the position. But Randle putting up 50 fantasy points to me, I feel like, I don't want to say you can lock that in, but I feel pretty confident about it, barring this game getting completely out of hand, which it still can, even with a depleted Sixers squad. How about Alec Burks for you? Because he's still a guy that the price is there. I think yesterday was kind of a disappointing spot. The minutes didn't quite materialize for him. He got pulled for both Quickly and Ntilikina at various points. And it's a kind of a log jam of lead ball handlers. But Burks also showed in the second half of that game how he can heat up, start to carry the offense down the stretch, can also close, which is very important if this game does stay competitive. Are you willing to go back to Burks today and kind of the same logic as Quickly, where I don't think the opportunity is as big ceiling wise, but I feel like in terms of value, I want to at least get with the field on him on DraftKings?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think he's also in play on FanDuel. I was just checking the crunch. I finally was able to combine those two sets of 500. So we had a few dupes, but we're dealing with 997 lineups now. I got to Alec Burks in 15% of those across both mine and Alex's projections. So we are going to have some Burks after we sort things. To put that number in perspective, 60% of those lineups, 597 of them had Emmanuel Quickly in them. 6% of them had Reggie Bullock in them. So we're getting to some Knicks. I'm not overly comfortable with the Bullock one. I know Josh was heavy on him earlier in the day. Not sure where he is on him now as a value play. I just don't think he's a very good player overall. I know Tibbs likes him. He rolls him out there. The guy can hit some threes from time to time, play a little defense on the wing. I don't know. He's a risky DFS play in my mind. I like Alec Burks a lot better, mostly because Tibbs trusts him to run the point, essentially, to be the primary ball handler and primary facilitator in the offense when he has to. And we've got a few of the Knicks' primary ball handlers out of this game. So I think he gains relevance through that. I love the price at 4,600, and I like the leverage score. We're not getting him over-owned on FanDuel. He's under-owned. On DK, he's like right at his optimal lineup appearance rate. So I think he's a fine play. I wish he had multi-position eligibility on DK. It's kind of surprising that he doesn't. He's only a small forward over there. If we could flex him to one of the guard spots, he'd be significantly more valuable, a lot more utility, but I think he's very much in play.
Yeah, Bullock, I think the one thing that jumps out to me is just that people are going to see that monster day yesterday, and he had 40 minutes played too. So if he plays 40 minutes, there's a decent chance that something like that could happen again. Yeah. But he's also rebounding at a higher level. I mean, all of his shots were falling. He's normally a 0.64 fantasy point per minute guy. Like, I get wanting to take the stab there. And we only had him at 13% projected ownership on DraftKings, which surprises me because I think the field will chase that a lot heavier. And I would rather go back to Quickly and Burks because these guys have proven over a longer period of time that they can do this night in and night out. Even Quickly as a rookie, even the preseason, like if he gets opportunity, he does make things happen, even when he shoots terribly like yesterday. I just don't know that I have that confidence in Bullock, and he could run hot again, but I felt like, I don't want to say fish play. I always hate it's not pejorative to me to like play somebody who doesn't project that well. But I do think that Bullock yesterday rewarded so much of the field more than I would have expected that it wouldn't shock me if his numbers were higher today, at least on DraftKings.
Yeah, that makes sense that he would be owned and maybe outstrip our projections. And the further he gets into ownership, the less I like him against our optimal lineup rate. He's up at 3,800 too on DK. If he was the minimum on DK like he is on FanDuel, you would gain that positional flexibility moving in between both guard and forward. He would have a lot of utility at minimum price. I just think 3,800 is a lot to ask for him. And that's, it's not much. That says a lot about what I think of the player. But the guy's been starting for the Knicks all year long. How many times has he been relevant for us in DFS? He needs to get like 40 minutes to be relevant. I just don't want to go that route. I don't want to forecast that. So he's not going to be really on the board for me. He'll probably come up in a few of these lineups. I read off the percentage. So he might pop into some of them just based on being the minimum price and kind of being a building block where we don't have to worry about him doing a ton to at least deliver that median projection. But for upside, I don't love it.
So we just got some news. We actually had some news that I meant to circle back on, but Kevin Love being ruled out, not a surprise. He was doubtful all day. Lou Dort being ruled out, that is a bit of a surprise. The Thunder starting Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Teo Maledon, Pokusevski, Roby, and Brown. So Roby moving into the starting lineup there. I guess everybody's minutes get more secure as well because Svi Mikhailiuk is available to make his Thunder debut Tuesday, but is unlikely to play. So that is one straight from the coach. And then the Hawks news, Onyeka Okongwu and Clint Capella both out, Terry, and that means I'm going to get too much John. I don't even want to crunch to get John Collins now because this always goes poorly for me, Terry, but the numbers jump off. I actually pull them up in advance of the show just to have them ready so I can figure out how much I want to swap to with Collins. I already have 10% Collins, and honestly may just stick with that out of fear of everybody swarming to John Collins. And trust me, as somebody who overprojects him every night, it can be very tilting to have John Collins in your life. But a 20% rebound rate without Capella, Hunter, and Reddish, and it's not the biggest sample size for that one, Terry, 226 minutes, but the usage should go up as well. The usage really for everybody should take an uptick. Trae Young, a 35% usage rate, guys. So that's right where he should be. But Collins, 32% usage in court time without Capella, Hunter, and Reddish. Gallo should pick up the start here too, see some more minutes. I'll check the minutes update for the Hawks whenever we get that through from Awesemo. But how does this change everything for you with Atlanta? Because this is a big spot against Houston that certainly anybody can get going against a Houston team that has no size and really nobody to worry about defensively.
No size, no skill, no NBA players. What else do they know? What else do they lack? Yeah, it's ugly team over there that they're matched up against. So it's Victor Oladipo and the also-rans. I think this gives John Collins a massive boost. Everything that I just crunched is now irrelevant. I was getting to him anyway at 6,500 on FanDuel. I like that price. And I think now that he's going to be the focal point of the entire front court that they're running out there, I really like that. So I think for all the reasons that you just read off as far as his rates and everything, we definitely need to start looking at forcing him into, well, not forcing, but recrunching because his projection's about to pop. And I think all these numbers in the next update are going to skyrocket. I think we need a lot of John Collins tonight. I think Trae Young becomes even more relevant. I liked him already. I think he was coming up in a good amount of the optimals. His boom score is a little lower than I would expect on FanDuel against that low salary. I think $9K, pretty low price for Trae Young over on FanDuel. 10-2, a lot more appropriate on DraftKings. And his boom score probability over there is, around what I would expect for that price. But I was expecting him to have a higher number on FanDuel. So I'll be interested to see where this goes up to in this next update, assuming he gets a few more touches, a little bit more usage. It's rare for to be able to say Trae might take a few more shots, but he might. So I think we could go there. And I think it makes a lot of sense to start looking at, getting more of him than we were before as well.
All right, so the Awesemo update just came through, and God, John Collins projects so well, which is just upsetting. But I'm sure this is a day where if I don't get more of him, it's gonna be an amazing day for John Collins. So this is the spot that I'm gonna have to figure out. But 41 points or fantasy points projected, DK points at his price, that would make him one of the best values on the slate. And without even adjusting for rates and all of that, my projections manually adjust based upon the expected rebounds on a given day relative to the Vegas total. So those heavily would go to Collins and Gallo, I think too. Probably a guy who'll get forgotten a bit in the ownership because everybody's going to go to the center minutes. Obviously, those are good as gold for the most part. For most players when you're playing center minutes as opposed to power forward minutes. I've talked about it with enough guys throughout the year, but Collins, about a 20% rebound rate, as I mentioned earlier, could be expected here. And just playing center, even if he doesn't get that big of a minutes boost, and Alex didn't give him that big of a minutes boost, just 33 minutes projected for Collins. That should be enough for him to look like one of the best projected plays on the slate. And the other question I'll ask you, Terry, assuming the ownership can come up a lot here, how much ownership is now too much for John Collins for how you're building things? And at what point, if the field is, let's say 40, 50%, do you move away from Collins or do you want to get above that?
So let me take a look at where he came up in the rates. Cause that's, it's interesting. He doesn't actually come up. I don't know if they reran the simulation on this optimal rate. I suspect maybe we haven't rerun that part of that yet, because that optimal rate is still pretty low. His boom score probability shot up. So we're expecting now Collins, 54.8% boom score probability. You mentioned the minutes. Alex had him at 27.9. I know that because I haven't updated that part of it yet. And if you jump to 32, you're talking about, decent little uptick in minutes, not extreme, but enough that for a 1.05 fantasy point per minute producer, that's going to add to his total. So his median score is going to jump. I think we've talked about all the reasons that we expect that he could approach that ceiling game that we need from him. I really like the play. I expect that if you're looking at the boom score, the boom bust tool, I expect that optimal lineup rate will probably go up when we run the simulation if there's time to.
Yeah, and I'm going to recrunch. I'm going to reluctantly recrunch because I think John Collins. I think I'm actually going to set a group to require one of Collins or Gallo because I think that to me is the spot that has to gain something here. And if that goes wrong, I think I'm not going to. Well, I'll know going in that I knew the risk involved. And it's always a case of building DFS lineups, especially when you're forcing things that aren't there in the projection. But with how both guys took massive jumps to me, but I just don't have the most confidence in both Hawks guys getting there. I'm gonna have at least one. Would you do max one or any max groupings for the Hawks now? Because I think the penchant is always to get too many of these guys, and I know sometimes that trips me up where I end up giving a little too much of a projection to a guy like I don't know who would be in this rotation, but so like I guess Gallo could be it, or Bogdan Bogdanovic maybe, or even Tony Snell. Like how many Hawks become too many for you in this situation, Terry, where people may be running to cram in Hawks, even though, as you mentioned, like it's very possible it just ends up being Trae Young getting up a lot more shots, as well as a little bit more for Collins and Gallo.
Yeah, and that's the concern. They do have some movable parts, particularly on the wing, that they can rotate through, the 3 and the 4 there. So I'd be a little bit hesitant maybe to force anything like that, where I was making a rule that says, definitely want at least one of these guys. If I was to do it, it would probably be between the guys that you named first, going with Collins and Gallinari. But even with Gallinari, I don't fully trust him. I know that the production's there. I know that the minutes are there, but I don't know that he's going to slot into, positionally and salary-wise, if he's going to slot into the spots as smoothly as some other options on the board. So if he does, the optimizer is going to do that for us. If he doesn't, the optimizer is going to do that for us. If you force it, you're going to completely rule out all those other lineups that the optimizer might have gotten to. So that's why I like to usually say, let the optimizer optimize, let it do its thing. So the more we restrict it, the more we build rules on top of it, the further and further we're getting away from the best possible construction paths. I think you might be doing that if you forced Gallinari. If you wanted to lock John Collins and just say, I'm riding the John Collins play, I think I would like that better than locking the either or.
Okay. I think that's fair. And honestly, I might just lock John Collins in hopes that he pays me back for all the shitty games he's had all year long. And, but that's what it's all about. And it is money time, as our producer Jordan reminds me. I'm wearing the money suit, so I don't know how I could forget, but late breaking news like that, always going to throw me for a curve. I'll refresh the ownership projections. Again, they're free today, so you don't need me to read them to you. And these probably do not reflect where John Collins is going to end up. But real fast, top 5 on DraftKings. Number 1, Moses Brown at 50%. Number 2, LeBron James at 30%. Number 3, Emmanuel Quickly at 28%. Number 4, Tomas Satoransky at 26%. And number 5, Alexei Pokusevski. Oh, I nailed it that time. Wow.
Nice. Well done.
Never again, but Pokusevski, 25% on FanDuel. The top 5 looks like, again, not updating for the Hawks news yet. KJ Martin Jr., number 1 at 44%. He is minimum salary on there, which I guess explains why I got him in every lineup. Emmanuel Quickly, 38%. Ben Simmons, 35%. LeBron James, 35%. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 32%. I guess let's talk Rockets, Terry, because I like KJ Martin a lot. And I think this spot too, where you're going to have 2 less good rebounders in the mix for Atlanta, no Capella, no Okongwu. I think that makes things better for a guy like KJ Martin, who is also going to benefit from not having House out there, Ben McLemore being out. There's a lot of minutes to go around for Martin now. And he's been a 1.06 fantasy point per minute guy so far this year and has shown the ability to get to the mid 30s in minutes. KJ Martin, Terry, on FanDuel, I would say he's like the Moses Brown on there. Moses Brown is also the Moses Brown on FanDuel, but I think so cheap that I think he makes every lineup work. That KJ Martin to me on FanDuel looks like an important play. On DraftKings, I think a very good play, but maybe a little bit less important or less necessary.
Yeah, and starting to shape up like a night where if you're just going by building in optimal lineup type guys, you might come up way short on salary spend. So it's going to be an interesting construction night. You might end up with a lot of positions filled and a lot of money to go to some star players. So, keep the LeBrons of the world in mind as you're building lineups. I think KJ Martin is deadly important on FanDuel tonight. Only a 26-minute projection, but he ranks out as one of the top plays in terms of optimal lineup. He's going to be super popular, like you mentioned, but he's another one of those guys that's coming up frequently enough, especially at the small forward position on FanDuel, where it's just not a bevy of incredible options. I think he's going to be optimal enough or frequently enough optimal, I should say, that we need to get to him and that we need to start looking that way. He is the top option at the position, slightly ranked above LeBron James, significantly ranked above LeBron James in terms of boom score probability. That's all about the price. LeBron is more than 3 times as expensive.
And also make sure to stay tuned. I'm just being reminded by checking my Twitter feed, the No House Advantage show, going an extra half hour today to talk about No House Advantage and the best props on there. In addition to any breaking news, which it seems like it was looking like a quiet day, Terry. And then all of a sudden everything goes left as it always does here. But we will be here another half hour past the FanDuel and DraftKings lock. So stay tuned. And the late slate show coming up, the late slate sweat and swap coming up at 6:30 Pacific, 9:30 Eastern, where we'll talk a half hour for the 2-game slate, then talk about the showdown. I believe it's me and Greg Ehrenberg today. I'll probably be in more normal attire because I can't imagine this is my job and I get to wear backwards hats every day and I'm wearing a suit for no reason. So that's, I guess you got to change it up, but I'll be back in a sweatshirt for that one coming up at 6:30 Pacific, 9:30 Eastern. Also, Semi Ojeleye starting in place of Tristan Thompson for the Celtics, so keep that in mind. And the Knicks will start again Emmanuel quickly. So any concerns there about Ntilikina starting or anything like that, that is not going to be the case. And actually, one more news item. The Rockets players available Tuesday: Kevin Porter Jr., Victor Oladipo, Sterling Brown, Jae'Sean Tate, Justin Patton, Mason Jones, Kenyon Martin Jr., and Jeremy Lamb. So that is an 8-man group, Terry. And I think that really cements, too, the Kenyon Martin Jr. part of things, where he's super productive. He just falls into stats. He does also do a lot of defensive things. Steals and blocks are definitely part of his game, where he's going to attack every block that he can. I think that Martin, just knowing there's only 8 guys there, I feel even better about him on FanDuel especially.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at that 3,500 price is what it's all about. But you just mentioned, you touched on all the production, and you said something sharp in the last segment about him, where you mentioned that he's going to be going up against a front court that we just found out is going to have some significant absences and some significant rebounders absent. So that's going to open up a lot for him. Somebody was talking about it on one of the shows yesterday, day before, about how a lot of the times we consider what happens in that guy's team, right? Capella is going to be out. What happens with the guys on his team? We also have to consider what happens for the guys on the other team. What's the opportunity created for that? And in this specific spot, exactly like you just nailed, KJ Martin's going to have a lot of opportunity underneath. So I really like the play. It just continues to climb in value. I think we have to just crush the field's ownership on that one.
Yeah, we're still waiting for a minutes update on Houston, but I'll see if we get that coming up here, and because I have to plunk it in. Actually, might have just come through to see where Houston's minutes lie, because minutes are gold in DFS, even in matchups that are adverse. And the Atlanta matchup, even though they've been better defensively this year, I don't think that's one I would consider adverse at all. Getting 8 guys playing concentrated minutes, I think, is interesting. And I guess the other question now to ask, Terry, is how does this affect your interest in the other Rockets, where Oladipo and Kevin Porter Jr. might not have been guys popping up a lot for you, but now I would think these guys are going to look infinitely better just because you're losing one more guy who could score a good amount in Ben McLemore, or at least is going to put up shots. Now you're going to see more possessions going to Oladipo, more going to Kevin Porter Jr., in addition to the other guys. Does anybody take a meaningful jump for you? Because it looks like, for me, I'm just making sure to get these minutes right here, Oladipo takes a pretty decent jump for me. And I think Sterling Brown too. He does a little bit of everything, and the way that my projections work without changing the rates around, I think he's a guy that's going to benefit, maybe not as much, but in terms of the minutes, they should be there. So who gets a jump for you with the Rockets besides the aforementioned KJ Martin?
Yeah, just looking at mine, I just plugged the minutes update into my sheet here, which puts me side by side, and I haven't updated Alex's, so I can see kind of where we were and where we are. So I get about a 3-point bump on Oladipo, about a 2-point bump on Kevin Porter, 1.5 on Jae'Sean Tate. So basically everybody gains a little bit. My favorite plays, I would probably just look to the guys that I consider to be an NBA player and a couple potential NBA players in Oladipo, Kevin Porter, and Jae'Sean Tate. And then, of course, the KJ Martin that we've already talked about. The other guys, there's a lot of also ran kind of guys in there. There's a lot of just, mediocre players there. Like, I don't know that Sterling Brown for 5,000 is something I really want to mess with, even if his projection just came up for me. It still doesn't come up tremendously optimal, tremendously toward his target score. So I've got him now projected for about a 25.5 point FanDuel night. At his 5,000 salary, we need him to get to about 38.8 fantasy points. I've got him doing that about 3.5% of the time. I just don't like it. I think that's too much freight to pay for a Sterling Brown. So give me the guys that we think are actual relevant NBA players, and I'll kind of take them as I get them. Nobody really jumps off the page outside of KJ Martin, but I would take shares of Oladipo, Porter, and Jae'Sean Tate.
We also just got an ownership update too, and it looks like John Collins is up to 30% ownership on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he looks like he is up to 31%. So similar amounts there. Any apprehension at all hearing those numbers out loud, Terry? And again, the ownership projections are free, so if you guys want to check them out yourself today, you can take a look on the site.
Yeah, no, I think those jibe pretty well with what we're getting now. The optimal rate came up with that, so the new simulation was run against the new ownership, and that's actually on FanDuel at least below what we're getting for him in optimal lineup rate. And same story on DK, actually getting a little bit better leverage score for him on DK than you are on FanDuel. So even with the increased ownership, we're still getting an advantage just by rostering him. So I would go to him early and often.
And so previously you talked about LeBron being a pay up option. I feel like we can talk about him in a second, but one guy we need to hit on, because I know people see the box score results yesterday and be curious to hear more, but Talen Horton-Tucker, a guy that I think we all have some degree of curiosity about in DFS because he's been so productive per minute. And there are just so many inhibitors to him getting the run that he probably deserves based on what he's shown as a Laker so far. But for him, I think he projects now as a value play that's in the mix with these guys, but not quite as good as some of the Tomas Satoranskis of the world. I think Moses Brown as well, even with the positionality there, that's going to be a bit of a difference, but I still think I'd rather have those guys. But that said, Talen Horton-Tucker still 3,600 on DK, only a 20-minute projection for him. How are you feeling about him? And I guess, do you feel like you need to get some of him in the hopes that he can have that 40 fantasy point upside again, especially if Alex Caruso stays out?
Yeah, I think with him, we're kind of hoping for more minutes than what we've got him projected for. If he's able to crack through to like 24 minutes, 26 minutes, somewhere in that neighborhood, I think it becomes a lot more interesting at that price. He's just, compared to some of the other value plays on the board, he's just a little bit of a tough ask to trust that he's going to produce enough of a relevant fantasy score for us to get us over the top. We've got him as of this last update at 3,600. You also only get him at small forward, so you don't have the ability to move him around the board like you do with some of those other value plays on DK. But we've only got him projected 19-point median projection, only coming up optimal under 5% of the time. He's getting owned like double that. So he's kind of a trap play for me on the board. Unless we see his minute projection jump, I think he is probably where you're walking into something that we might not want to roster.
Okay. So I think I'm probably on the same page. And then maybe for the late slate, I think you probably have a little more interest, but I have some concerns he's going to be overowned, only projected for just under 10% ownership on DraftKings in the most recent run we had. So I think, maybe that his number is right and it's not too onerous, but still 10% on a guy where the minutes aren't the most secure in there. All it takes is another hot Kuzma day or him really just gunning more than he did yesterday for Talen Horton-Tucker to not have the ceiling. And I think that would be my concern here. And now I think I'm going to run my last crunch. Any spots that we haven't hit? Actually, I guess we should do the LeBron question now too, Terry. Is he the premier pay up option for you on today's slate, where going against Minnesota seems like a good spot, though? LeBron has been kind of half-assed again, I think, coming out of the break in a way that's noticeable. The fantasy stats caught up yesterday for the most part, but deferring on a lot of possessions, maybe not as high of a usage guy so far, as at least what you'd expect the normal rates of him without Anthony Davis and without Marc Gasol. But are you just punching LeBron in because there's so much value, it's hard to imagine going anywhere else?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think he is probably the premier pay up option. There are expensive other guys that I like on FanDuel. Dame Lillard springs to mind. Trae Young springs to mind. Those guys play different positions, though. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander springs to mind. Ben Simmons as well. All those guys play different positions. By far, LeBron is the best small forward on the board in terms of everything that he does. Outside of, if we actually know now, even in optimal lineup appearance rate, we've had KJ Martin come down some. So LeBron is well ahead of him in the optimal lineup rate. So the boom score is where KJ Martin, just based on being min price, is now approaching 70% boom score probability compared to LeBron's 30-ish. But a 30% boom score probability against a 10-4 salary on FanDuel, massive. That's a very big number. 24.3 on DK against a 10-5 salary, also massive. You get to roster him as a point guard or a small forward over there. I love the play. Is LeBron James, I think even a half-ass LeBron James against this Minnesota team could put up a relevant fantasy score for us, even at those big salaries. So definitely love getting to LeBron. I would mix him in with some rotations of those other stars. And I'd love to, with all the value on the board, get to him and one of them, him and two of them if I can. So I'm going to be doing a lot of different combinations of all those names I read off.
Also, a quick super chat from Andrew Kang. And sorry, we missed it a couple of minutes ago, but trying to make sure we get to the news as well as making sure we don't lose all of our money by either playing John Collins or not playing John Collins accordingly. Andrew Kang, though, asking, what's up, guys? Hope all is well. With a close game, do you expect Dwight Howard to play around 30 minutes? And how do you feel about Pokusevski tonight, who we talked about? But asking a lot of questions, but I'll go one by one here. Dwight Howard to play around 30 minutes seems lofty, I think. Awesemo has him in for, let's see.
23-1.
Yeah, 23. So yeah, that's a little bit much. I guess there's some way Tony Bradley gets in foul trouble, but you probably need something outside of the norm to happen for him to get to 30. Pokashevsky, I guess we talked about early enough, Terry. We might as well revisit it one more time. I don't mind him. I think now with the value around there, I'm probably going to be splitting some of his ownership that I would have given. And I think Sterling Brown still projects well enough for me that I'm going to take some stabs at a little bit less ownership. But Terry, one last thought on Poku for you, and just you go Fanduel specific if you want.
Yeah, he's on the board, but not really relevant for me. Looks like he's actually changed in this latest update. He's getting more ownership now, so he's about quadruple owned than he is to be optimal. So that's a play I wouldn't touch at this point on FanDuel. Looking over on DK, he's about doubled up. You're getting him more than 10%. That's usually like the threshold for a player like that I like to use. If he's under 10% optimal, I would consider him a little bit less, especially against that much ownership. At 12, I would take a few shares of him, but I definitely want to undercut the field ownership on him on DK as well. So I would be not touching him on FanDuel, undercutting him on DK.
All right. And checking for questions on the premium Slack. So if you have them, drop them in now because we're going to try to make sure to hit the YouTube ones. And of course, the people who are joining the site on YouTube or joining the channel on YouTube are going to get first priority. And then make sure to stay tuned. The extra half hour here for No House Advantage. We're going to go through some of the top plays and I'll talk about any breaking news as well. Fantasy Wiz asking LaVine, Ben Simmons, I guess is a two-man, LaVine and Ben Simmons or Trey and Shea for FanDuel. Terry, I would go the Trey and Shea way, I think, though. Simmons and Shea are my favorite out of those four. How do you feel about this one where you have LaVine and Ben Simmons or Trey and Shea Alexander?
Yeah, I would go for the Trey and Shea route for sure. They're significantly higher up. I'm just looking for where LaVine dropped to on this most recent update. He is downboard significantly compared to those other options. So 9,400 he's starting to get into that price range where he's got to do a lot. He's been doing it. He's been having a great year, 1.20 fantasy points per minute. He's under owned on the FanDuel slate. You're getting a nice 4 leverage score on him. I just think we're risking a significant amount. The other guys are coming up optimal about double the amount of time that he is. So significantly fewer people will be on him. So if you're super chalky in all your other spots and you want a reasonable pivot for price, I think he's reasonable. I don't think he's an incredible pivot, but I think you can do it if you need to.
And we just got another question here. Let's see. Do you think there's a realistic chance, Matt asking the premium Slack, do you think there's a realistic chance Robert Williams sees over 25 minutes tonight? I think there's a realistic chance. I think you're still probably ebbing against the current a little where Awesemo has him for 21 minutes. And at his DK price, I found it hard to get. I think I'm probably going to have none actually when I sort through this final crunch, but I was only getting him 6% before all the John Collins news. But Terry, how do you feel about Robert Williams? Are you willing to go there heavy on a day where Daniel Tice is going to be owned, but is not the value chalk like it looked like he might have been earlier today with no Tristan Thompson?
Yeah, it's not really a spot that I've been on. I just don't love the matchup. There's nothing really coming up a ton for me in this game. I was getting a couple of shares of Tatum, a couple of shares of Brown. I don't know that I got to any of anybody else. And I think that's kind of how I like it. I think 6,000 for Robert Williams on FanDuel at the center spot, probably a little bit much in this kind of a spot. We've seen him produce. We know what he does, but I just think going up against this Utah team, I don't love that for him. 5,600 on DK. He's a little bit more relevant, but not really in play. I think there's just better spots to go to.
Brad Levine asking a showdown. This guy plays every showdown. I got to give Brad Levine credit. He knows his lane and sticks to it. But showdown question for the Utah game: who would be a safe captain and a leverage captain? I say this without having looked at the showdowns. That's not the main one or the late night one for a single second today. But I do feel like the main captain would probably be Jason Tatum, which I don't like. That's going to be the chalk captain, I would think. And then the leverage captain, I would guess would be going to Kemba Walker and hoping that he somehow shoots the Celtics into that game. But obviously, Terry, without even having looked at it for a second, you have any off the top of your head thoughts on a showdown captain you would want on Draftkings for that Utah game?
I like the Kemba call. He was a guy that jumped into mind as far as somebody who wasn't getting a ton of ownership, but was viable in terms of being one of the the top guys in that game, top optimal plays in that game. So I think we could definitely go that route. There's not anybody really. Like I said, this is probably my least favorite game of the day, so it's a tricky question to decide who I like from it now. I think Kemba would be my sneakier guy. And then my top guy, I think the safe one, if we're using that word, everybody's about the same rank, but I would look at Jaylen Brown.
All All right, let's see if we've got any more questions in the premium Slack. Mr. Moneybags, so I always have to take a question from Porter Jr. and Knight or Poku and Roby for a DK GPP. I don't like Roby. Knight, I don't really know. I guess Poku and Roby, but it seems odd to play both Poku and Roby. I feel like they would kind of cannibalize each other.
Yeah, that's one where I would uncheck a few things that I checked and start over.
Yeah, let me get my lineups here. Terry, do you see any questions that you want to answer real fast so I can hopefully not? I guess honestly, if I didn't get these John Collins lineups in, I would probably feel equally as bad or good. But I want to get him in. I have to. If John Collins is going to have a good day and I don't get it, Terry, I will be unbelievably upset.
He's one of those guys for you, huh?
He's absolutely, he's been in my head. He's ruined so many nights of mine. He's been the guy, the single snowflake in a lineup full of flame emojis. He is everything, the bane of my existence. He's everything to me. He's, when I close my eyes, he's all I see.
I got a few of those guys myself, but yeah, he's burned me a few times this year. So I feel you on that, but I think he's a good enough play that it makes sense to just force that through. So I'll talk a little bit. I don't have a question up in front of me, but there's a few guys, we touched on Dame Lillard, getting CJ McCollum back tonight. The guys on the show before us were talking about this. Just my 2 cents. I think he's still very much in play. You guys heard, if you listen to that show, Adam talked about the weeks that he had when CJ first came back last year were the weeks that he really exploded. And that's when everybody is remembering that everybody was pissed off for not rostering him because we figured it was time to get off of him because CJ was back. Then he went off. So I think we can still get to Dame. The price is up. He's at 10-1 on FanDuel, but that's still not like a broken, crazy high price on FanDuel for him. He's 10-8 on DK. We're really pushing it on DraftKings with that price, but it's keeping his ownership down a little. So I think under 10% ownership, coming up more optimal than that, I still think we can justify the spend on Dame Lillard over on DK. Another value kind of point guard that's probably worth mentioning, Ricky Rubio, going up against what is a reasonable Lakers defense, but only 5,200 on FanDuel, 59 on DK, a little bit more to pay for him. But another guy where you're getting him a little bit better than the ownership, getting a little leverage on him, and he slots in. He's a guy that makes other things happen in certain spots. He's more of a play on FanDuel, just a lot of utility in that 5,200 price. So he's one of the few other point guards, the non-star caliber level point guards that I would consider on FanDuel tonight.
All right, and I got my lineups in. So 70% John Collins is where that will land, and 34% Danilo Gallinari. So hopefully, I don't love that I got more than 100% of these two rats, these two rat bastards in my life, but they are in there. So that's my exposure. And then I'm still going very heavy on Moses Brown and very heavy on Tomas Satoransky. So that is basically my core for the day. Got a couple more questions in the premium Slack that we can grab here. Who are your two favorite from Houston? Sam Cassell Dance asks, I think, well, it's a little bit site dependent, but I would think for me, it's Kenyon Martin Jr. by a landslide on FanDuel. And then Kenyon Martin Jr. is still in the mix for me on DraftKings. And then honestly, I think it's Sterling Brown is number 2. I don't love that because I do think more production goes to Oladipo and Kevin Porter Jr., but Sterling Brown just does enough of everything that I don't mind getting to him, even though I guess I didn't get as much as I would have thought. I got 26% Oladipo, so I guess it's Oladipo and KJ Martin for me.
Yeah, that would be my answer, assuming I can't just pick Sam Cassell.
That is true. Sam Cassell, though, legendary Rocket. Well, I can't wait for him to be an NBA head coach and see that alien head of his on screen every single day again. Thoughts on Gobert? Kane is asking. I think the issue for me on DK with Gobert is you're now paying the tax for that Golden State game where he's clearly not going to have 28 rebounds in a game. And if he does it tonight because Boston sucks, then so be it. That does happen sometimes. They go completely cold, but I don't see a lot of reason to go to Gobert tonight. I got him less in the field. Still got him a little bit, though. I think he's just a fine center play to plug in when the money works. But Terry, do you feel any more strongly here about Gobert or less strongly? I feel like it must not be the case given that you said you didn't love this game.
Yeah, it's really a lot of just, mediocrity lumped together in terms of what we expect for fantasy production tonight. A lot of good players in that game, don't get me wrong. Gobert's one of them, 1.33 fantasy points per minute this year. Just excellent at the center spot. He's just a guy who he's always appropriately priced, I think, on FanDuel at least. So he's never really forcing his way into my lineups for value or for upside. He's just always kind of Rudy Gobert. So I usually only get a few shares of him in lineups. It looks like that's what's happening again today. I don't really see a path to a monster ceiling game for him tonight. It's a different matchup, so I don't love the play. It's not something I would be forcing in by any means.
And shout out to Anthony Davis, always generous. The super chat saying, let's get it, fellas. Quickly fade for me. Have fun. Hit the like DFS family. To Anthony Davis's credit, the results in the past don't always justify future followings of things, but Anthony Davis did get Tobias Harris fade right recently in a super chat. So got to give him credit, and maybe the man knows more than we do about quickly. So keep that in mind. Just got to make sure to represent all sides. And Anthony Davis, one of the sharper guys here, who drops money on us every day, like girls at the club. So we appreciate it very much, especially me in this outfit today. Let's see, going back to the premium Slack to see if we got anything. LaVine and Porter or Mitchell and Jaylen Brown. I have to say, really none of those guys are huge priorities for me. Even on FanDuel, I think is where the question is. But Terry, how do you feel about it? LaVine and Porter or Mitchell and Jaylen Brown?
Yikes. I don't like any of that. I mean, I like, pretty much most of the players, but none of those guys were really in the conversation about, a lot of the relevant DFS plays. I guess since I mentioned Jaylen Brown being my most relevant player in that Boston game, I would lean to that maybe, but I don't love any piece of that. I would lean to the Brown side though.
Is Kevin Porter in play on Super Draft? Let's see where he looks. I have not glanced. I've been too busy looking at No House Advantage all day. I stick to my one sponsor site per day. Let's see. What's the question about? It's Porter. Porter is actually not popping up too highly for Super Draft. 1.45x multiplier. He looks like he's pretty low down the list for Awesemo. Probably a guy you're getting to some of, but I think that's more in a lot of entries. The chalk play with good reason on Super Draft today looks like Emmanuel Quickly, the 1.75x multiplier. Danilo Gallinari as well, a 1.75x multiplier on him. So two guys who've taken a really meaningful jumps up in opportunity today because of the injuries around them. Those guys would be priority plays, it looks like, on Super Draft.
Yeah, I would expect Collins is probably in that type of a range too. And then do you still have it in front of you? What's the Moses Brown multiplier? Because I can't imagine they plan for that.
Collins is 1.35, so he's up there, though not as high as you might think. And Moses Brown apparently doesn't exist on Super Draft, at least for this slate. Or if he does, he wasn't imported, so no Moses. They might be locked later day. I don't know. Maybe that's why. Let's see. Going back to the Slack to see if there are any final questions here. Is 5 players from the OKC Chicago game too many in the DK single entry? Feels a little lofty to me. I think, especially if you've got more Chicago guys. Chicago's rotation, I feel like, is just a little too crowded for me to really want to comfortably bank on anybody besides Satoransky, who's cheap enough to get there. But Terry, how do you feel about that? I wouldn't advocate for 5 players. I feel like that's like maybe a 3 and 2 for the Thunder side, but that feels like a stretch.
Yeah, that's probably how I would want it to land, with like a Moses Brown, Shea, I guess maybe like Roby. I don't love that already.
I'd go over Roby.
Yeah, and it was probably better to make that call.
I don't like two Bulls, though.
Yeah, that's it. We talked about LaVine. We haven't been getting to a lot of him, and he's down board for me as well. Across 150, I would have him in 6% of lineups. Thad Young was coming up a little bit for me at the power forward. I think he's reasonably priced on FanDuel. So maybe if it was, if you had to, I would use Thad and then either Sato or LaVine as my 2 Bulls, and then I would lean into the 3 Thunder. But I don't love that construction.
Let's see there. We're locked now on DraftKings and FanDuel. So we're going to talk some No House Advantage coming up here. And if you want to play along with us on No House Advantage, actually, their tournament's been filling incredibly early recently. So let me just make sure that there are still vacancies available in some of their big tournaments. But yeah, still 64% full is their slam dunk today. 10K guaranteed, 5K to first. They also have the finger roll tournament, which is a $4 entry. That's 94% full. So if you want to do the cheap option, get over to nohouseadvantage.com now or download No House Advantage in the App Store. And if you are a new person signing up for No House Advantage for the first time, use the promo code Awesemo on there, because they will match your deposit up to $50. And hang on with us even if you're not playing on No House Advantage, because we're going to talk about both. And if there's any breaking news, we're going to make sure to cover that as well. Obviously focusing more on No House Advantage, but we're going to do our best to cover any news. And that's always a priority here on the show, because then we have to change our lineups and immediately walk back all of our hate for John Collins one show. If I lose money today, Terry, on a show with you, where I always do well when I do shows with you, because I think we share the air well, and you also know when I'm scrambling for my lineups. If I lose money on a day where I'm dressed like an asshole like this and you're on the show, I don't know what I'm going to do, Terry. I'm just going to cry probably.
That's just going to become the John Collins ejection jacket, the way you're talking and the way you've got him owned. I mean, that's in the mail at this point, right? That's got to be coming. First quarter
God,
ejection.
Now you put it into universe, and I hate that you did. Top props today on No House Advantage. We also have the optimal lineups page up on No House Advantage. So if you really want to half-ass it and not even think about anything, you just pull that in yourself. They have a CSV upload that you can use too. So it's about as painless as possible, or you can just enter it manually on the No House Advantage app or at nohouseadvantage.com. And again, if you're a new sign up on there, use the promo code Awesemo because they're deposit matching up to $50 immediately. And that is money you can play. And then, basically you win it and then you can keep it. So that's sort of the way that it works on there. So play at No House Advantage and go use the promo code Awesemo on there. But it looks like Kelly Olynyk's under today is one of the best odds on the board. There are two bets now that are the best on the board. One, I guess I'll get to next, but Kelly Olynyk, a 90.6% chance of hitting the under on his points plus rebounds plus assist line of 22.5. This is the thing that we talk about a lot with No House Advantage, where they are a site that is still, building these lines in advance, they can't change them throughout the course of the day. So it's the equivalent of having a 3K guy, Moses Brown, who's all of a sudden going to be playing 25 minutes. That's what No House Advantage is like every day with their prop lines. You could cross-reference them to OddsShopper as well, oddshopper.awesemo.com. See the win percentage and the ROI percentage on those. You'll often see that the lines are just a lot softer on No House Advantage. And that's a benefit for you as a player who's building lineups, in a GPP format, trying to outscore everybody else there. But you're still building against prop bets. And Kelly Olynyk, Terry, the under here looks like a very obvious, very easy play. And I would say in consideration to be a 10-pointer on No House Advantage because you have Bam Adebayo back, not on a minutes limit, though reportedly won't play long stretches. But I feel comfortable going on the under with Kelly Olynyk. Terry, do you feel any differently?
No, I'm right there with that one. That jibes with my projections. I was just looking it up. I didn't get to the other numbers, but raw actual points scored, I've got him under 8 points. So I suspect that the rest of that would align pretty well with being well under that 22.5 combined points, rebounds, assist mark. We probably have him under the rebounds mark, the next one down as well. So I definitely think that you mentioned Bam coming back. Lineup's going to be mostly healthy. He's available to play, not on a restriction, but we're going to restrict him is weird news to get. I don't really know what to make of that, but I have to just kind of assume that Bam's going to get a mostly full run, which I think just takes the top off of the possibility of Olynyk getting to this mark.
Yeah, with a 26-minute projection, I have him at, about 18.1, and my projection for points plus rebounds plus assists a little more generous than Awesemo. So I feel like building around Kelly Olynyk as the under is probably one of the best plays on the board. And another one that's now popped up because of what we talked about earlier with two of the Hawks big men out. It's going to mean John Collins' rebounds over looks like one of the best plays on the board. Awesemo has it as a 90.9% chance. God, I'm walking into the John Collins buzzsaw and I hate it, but it all looks too good, Terry. The rebounds looks pretty good for a 10-pointer, 90.9%. His points plus rebounds also looks pretty good, over 23.5 as an 83.3% chance of hitting. And that is one way to get a little bit different if he somehow doesn't hit his rebounds prop. Do you have any feel here? Because I know in the past, it's been one way that I haven't minded getting a little bit different. I know House Advantage is taking a points plus assists or a points plus rebounds instead of the straight rebounds or assist props. But do you feel like you would just take the rebounds prop straight away, given that it's got a 90.9% chance of hitting and points plus rebounds only has 83.3?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. We see the opportunity for him to rebound. The ball is going to fall into his hands enough times to make that happen without him really making much of an effort to rebound, box out, anything like that. I think he's going to crack that easily. Alex has him projected for almost 3 full rebounds or over that just in his median projection, just what he thinks is supposed to happen. So I think he blows through that 7.5 without much effort. I think we could easily play the points plus rebound. I don't think it's a mistake to. I think you're just a lot safer if you go the rebounds route. Thinking it through in terms of gaming it out, a lot of people might make that same decision. So if you're putting in a ton of lineups, it might make a lot of sense to start working in some of the multiple category plays. The points, rebounds, and assists is also right there at 81% likely. So you have a few different options, a few different ways to play John Collins. So I think the rebounds is the safest, but some of the others might be better like tournament type plays.
Grant B saying, I really want to play Collins, but Zion is going off. This is one thing I didn't get a chance to soapbox about today, but it's been the one thing that's been true of New Orleans. And I know Terry's heard me talk about it recently, but Zion just being less effective without JJ Redick on the court is something that I find interesting. And I'm still going to play actually a good amount of Zion Williamson today because I think there's enough money to go around that on DraftKings, his salary is down enough that I don't mind it. But I don't expect the Zion lineups that I have to be massive upside ones necessarily because He's just been not assisting at all the last 3 games. No JJ Redick out there. His rates take a drop. He goes down to a 17% assist rate, which is lower than his season average, and also, lower than where he's been running the last month, running really hot, playing that point Zion role that people talk about a lot in the basketball head space. I feel like Zion is fine today, but really not a play that I think people may be thinking he's going to have this bounce back game. And like Terry, I know we've talked about it before, but Zion to me, with him having a role that's a little bit less appealing because of losing a guy that I think changes the way that he can play and create for others compared to a guy like John Collins, who's much cheaper. Like, I know it sucks, and I don't want to be left holding the John Collins bag too much, but I would take John Collins at his price, $2K cheaper than Zion on DraftKings today, just because I think there's a ceiling here for John Collins that we didn't anticipate, whereas Zion, I think it actually could be a little bit worse than we've seen.
Yeah, I think Zion is somewhat capped, and the salary is, to me, the most critical aspect of this. We're expecting a bigger game from Collins for 2,000 less. That's the whole ball game right there. If you're making the Zion decision knowing that, you're doing DFS wrong. You can get to him in some of your lineups, sure, but if he is your primary play over John Collins for whatever reason, when you factor in things like salary and the overall upside, the amount that they're coming in optimal, it's just not the right play. Zion is a spectacular player. I expect him to be in the MVP conversation for a dozen more years. I just don't think that on this slate at 8,400, he's one of our go-to plays. 8,700, I like him even less on DK, even though you can, we're talking about the other site, whatever.
Hey, no, I mean, look, we're talking about everything here because that's sort of the way
I started
to approach
looking at his
really.
rates.
And that to me is why I think, playing on no house advantage is an easy way to port over, where you're looking at all the stuff for DraftKings anyway and FanDuel anyway. And if you have the time to invest in no house advantage, they don't even have Zion on the board tonight. So it's not something where you could fade his assist prop, but sometimes they do have guys on there where if you just think the DFS sites out there have them overowned, and like me, like I can't legally gamble in California right now or legally bet in California, but I can do a no house advantage on there. I feel like that's the spot where you can do your DFS hedge, like we talk about in the tip off so often, where you can fade a guy or, put a 10-pointer in for a guy who you have a lot of on a DFS site taking the under on him. I think that's one way to get different on there and try to make the most of the site. So everything correlates. It's always about correlation, whether it be positive or negative. Other top plays today, we'll just give you guys some of the top plays, and you can find them all yourself in the No House Advantage optimal lineups page, because that's going to be the easiest way to do it. Actually, we got a super chat too, which I'll take in a second, but some of the other top props, Derek Jones, 85% chance of going under on his rebound line, 5.5 is that one. Awesemo has him at 3.9. That one, not the sexiest one, but the rebounds props sometimes could be more predictable than anything you're going to find out there and have the best chance of nailing it under, especially. So I think that Derek Jones one might go under the radar. Kobe White's points plus rebounds plus assists, that one's too high. 25.5 is the line there. Awesemo has that as an 82.9% chance of going under. And Terry, I think that's one we should just talk about real fast, because I would definitely build around that one too. With Satoransky in there, like I know Satoransky's a guy that I like a lot on DraftKings, and I think if you're like me, you're gonna have a lot of him on DraftKings. I think maybe then you want to consider going the over on Kobe White, just on the chance that maybe this is the way that you can get your Kobe White exposure without, given that you're going so heavy on Satoransky on the other side. But that said, White's getting squeezed pretty hard here, and even if he does end up closing the game, which I would expect, he's still not getting as many minutes as he was before. And I think this line has been set really accounting for him to have the minutes he's had previously. So 83% on the under for Kobe White, points plus rebounds plus assists. Terry, would you take that one?
Yeah, that's a stiff total for him to reach if he's not getting a full complement of minutes. Like you said, he might close the game, but even if we're just taking 5 minutes at random off his total overall for the entire game, that's a lot for him to do in a little bit of time. So he would have a lot of work cut out for him in that in those closing minutes. I don't think he gets there. I agree with Alex. He's going to be pretty significantly under that mark. I had him a little bit higher, but negligibly. It's less than a full point higher. So I think we can hammer that. That's a great spot. And just looking at the optimal lineups page, he's in the 10 spot in the lion's share of optimal lineups, at least on the first page. And then as we click into some other pages, we get Derek Jones, who you just mentioned, but he's in like the top half of the 10 spot on the second page too. So he is one of the most frequently optimal top plays on the board.
Also, here's a super chat we can talk. Actually, this isn't a super chat, but I just thought it was funny. Ryzen Hall saying Spags is Sativa, Terry's Indica. I'm sure No House Advantage would love to hear those comparisons on their show, but I just thought that was a fun one. I feel like being the couch lock one sounds nice too, but I like being the buzzy creative one.
That's if we're talking about what we're purchasing from our legal dispensaries, I actually prefer the one that you were called. significantly. I like the natural buzzy ones, but all right, I'll take the low key. I'm a little slow and low key, and I talk like this, I guess. All right.
And we are both actually States, so we're allowed to talk about it. There's nothing wrong about it. Samuel Bennett put in a super chat saying Nathan Knight trusts the projections. So this is, I guess, trying to target the need for a big man or the want for a big man for Atlanta. The issue is really, I don't know why you would play him. Awesemo does have him in for 17 minutes. So I guess that's noteworthy that Nathan Knight at minimum salary, maybe he gets in. He didn't get into any of my lineups. So I actually don't think I exposed him to be available into my player pool. So that could be a part of it. But if you're not playing Collins, you're not playing Gallo, I think that makes him a little more logical. But he's honestly been pretty productive on the year. It's a very small sample size, but 1.2 fantasy points per minute. Rebound rate's been at 17%. I just don't know that you could trust the minutes, even to be at the 17-minute mark that Awesemo has, Terry. But would you go to Nathan Knight on the DFS sites today if you had the room to?
I don't think so. I was just searching through my sorting tool here, and I froze the whole thing even trying to find him. But it looks like he is actually in a couple of these lineups. So I just want to see if he actually ended up in any of the sorted ones after we did that. I'm just scrolling down to his name while I'm talking here. Nope. Across 1,000 lineups, he was in 0.4% of them, and he made it into none of the sorted lineups.
Okay, so yeah, not a priority play. I do have to say I'm a little bit alarmed by the projection that I have on him, just the 17-minute projection that Awesemo gave, but I have him for 21.8 fantasy points, which I think would make him look pretty viable. But that said, I don't have the most confidence in that number for really any of the reasons you might guess. And but he's been a 23% usage rate guy, 17% rebound rate guy. These are numbers that would scream positively to me. So if there is a pathway for him to get minutes, I just don't know the spot against Houston. Like, why do you want a guy with any size at all out there? I think against Houston would be the one question I would have. So your risk may, your miles may vary, but the risk is there. And I guess the upside's also there.
Yeah, I think they're just mostly going to get by with using some of these wings and playing small. I just don't see the need to go to him here. So I think the 16.7 minutes that Alex has on him is pretty accurate probably. He came up for me with that mark at 16.44 FanDuel points, which is just, a not relevant score. You heard how much I got to him. Going by my target score that I said he would need, even at 3,500, the dead minimum, we would need 31.5 points out of him. I've got him getting there 0.73% of the time.
Yeah, and also Elfrid Payton officially ruled out. So any of the concerns that you might have about Emmanuel Quickley, besides him shooting 6 for 19 again, should be allayed a little bit there. And the Sixers starting Tony Bradley again alongside Simmons, Curry, Green, and Harris. So nothing surprising there. But if you were playing a lot of Tony Bradley, that's one item to keep in mind. Back to no house advantage. Some of the better overs on the slate for them today. I just refreshed the page to make sure that I got everything accurate. I'm actually like really worried about this Nathan Knight thing. Like just not having any of him and having so much Collins. Like if Nathan Knight outscores John Collins today, that's going to be, I will be on the Late Slate show later, pulling a full Eric Lindquist, losing my absolute mind.
That would be a total disaster. Now you've put it into the world. I did.
Here's a fun over. Trae Young's rebounds prop is now one of the top overs on the day because of just rebounds are going to go to other people. And Clint Capella, 25% rebound rate for most of the year. That's going to open up a lot of rebounds. 82% chance of the over on rebounds for Trae Young. Terry, are you feeling confident on that one? Because that is now one of the best bets on the board in no house advantage.
Wow, that's a surprise. Yeah, I guess if he's coming up, it's not one I really thought about what his number might be on that, but it's not exactly a big nut to crack at 3.5. He's going to be on the court for a significant amount of that game, and like we talked about, a lot of the key rebounders are going to be off the court. So the balls that don't just naturally fall into John Collins' hands, yeah, they might bounce out toward Trae. He might pick a couple up. So yeah, I guess if I'll ride with the boss on that one. Alex has him projected for 5, so we're going over.
Yeah, I think that's another one that really is going to be opened up entirely because of the injuries that happened. And that's one that I think will probably go under-owned. So if you made that your 10-pointer at no house advantage, I think you're getting different right away, certainly taking on a little bit more risk than the guy with like Collins is going to have the sort of certifiable rebound rate. But yeah, I have Trae at 4.9 projected rebounds too. So I guess I'm right there with Alex. And it's one that maybe you would miss for all the reasons we talked about, where, you think the Collins benefit is going to be most direct, but just when you have somebody who's going to have that many rebounds on a given night, like Capella and also Okongwu too, those are two groups that are now going to give just a few more chances for Trae Young for just a ball to squeeze out. And Houston shoots so many threes too. I feel like probably decent. I actually feel fairly confident about that one. I would take it as a 10-pointer.
Yeah, you got a lot of chuckers on both these teams. So I think there's definitely going to be rebounds available unless everybody's just draining all their shots and we get an absurdly high scoring game. But I don't think that's the case. And I really like the call on him being kind of an off the board play. People who aren't using projections out there, which is a lot of people, there's not a lot of sites providing projections at all for this, for no house advantage. So I think you get a tremendous advantage going to plays like that off of Alex's projections. So you spot a play like that, bouncing up the board really high, and then the under on the Derek Jones. Those are two guys people aren't going to be thinking about that rebound prop for either one of those guys. And they're both coming up as supremely optimal plays for us and some of the most likely plays. I like both of those as plug and play. Build around those because those are both going to be offbeat plays on no house advantage. And you can build in some of the more obvious stuff around it. I really like both of those calls.
Also, somebody pointed out in the YouTube chat that Nathan Knight took some run for Gallo. I honestly haven't followed the Nathan Knights. Actually, I'll pull a popcorn machine real fast just because I'm now like desperately intrigued by the Nathan Knight.
I have to admit, I did not look into him. So
no, I didn't. I mean, I knew that he was like in the like on the cusp of the rotation, but yeah, he played 23 minutes last time out, and then was a monster for one stretch where he had just basically had everything, was rebounding everything, got to the line a bunch, made some twos. And yeah, honestly, Bruno Fernando was still in the mix there too. So Nathan Knight might not be the backup center. He may be more of a backup 4. So I don't know that affects Collins too much, but I think maybe if you were to play Knight in the lineup without Gallo, that could make some sense because they do seem to be direct backups now that I'm looking at it.
Yeah, if you can get that third quarter that he had in the other game, and if we can apply that to tonight, that would be pretty spectacular. It's a tough ask. It's still, he had 22.9 minutes that game and kind of got there. If he did that again, yeah, he's going to be on the board. I don't know that he vaults his way into the optimal lineup by smashing a ceiling score still, but at the min price, you're slowly talking me into maybe he's a little bit more relevant, but I still don't love it. I think he's got a ton of work to do, even at min price, to get to where we need him to be.
I just know I'm manually putting him in one lineup because I'm afraid of the amount I would get if I reran everything right now, but I'm going to just throw him into one without Gallo in the hopes that it somehow is useful. And I'm sure I'm now probably just ruining a really good lineup that would have made me all the money tonight, but that's fine. That's fine. I got to get a little bit of Nathan.
And you're going to hate yourself when that lineup finishes third in whatever tournament that is.
It's like Nathan Knight has 1 point. It's like, oh, that's all it took. He's minimum salary. It's not supposed to kill you. That's the whole thing. People coming into the chat now to ask about Nathan Knight. I feel like we've covered him enough, but the end sum is that he looks like a decent play, but Awesemo has him for 17 minutes. So if he keeps up his rates, then he actually could be a good play getting 17 minutes, but you're taking on some degree of risk. So that's the final Nathan Knight talk. It was a blowout against Cleveland. Doesn't matter, Jay. He was playing in the first quarter and the second quarter and all that too. It wasn't just a blowout run. Let's see. Back to no house advantage. Some of the other top props on there. We'll actually, let's go down a little bit further. Some of the 50% props, because I think these are the ones sometimes that get completely overlooked and can have a little more equity if you get into the mix as higher. And for the most part, you're playing probability. But if you were playing a bunch of lineups of no house advantage, it does seem to me like the wise move might be to mix in a few of these 50% ones, maybe ones that you feel have a stronger lean. And one that I have a little bit of a stronger lean on, Julius Randle's points plus rebounds plus assists. 39.5 is the line, Terry, on no house advantage. And Awesemo has him for 40. I actually need to see where I have him, but it's got to be higher because I think I have him higher projected than Awesemo does today. I like the spot. I feel like Julius Randle, a guy who benefits a lot from having no Elfrid Payton in the mix, as well as no Derrick Rose. And I think he also contributes in every category. And I think if he has a 35-point day, but sucks at rebounding or just, lets the rebounds go to Noel or whomever it may be, or just assists a bit less, I feel like for a guy like Randle, I don't mind going to points plus rebounds plus assists because he does so much of everything and really drives that whole offense. Is that a play you'd consider taking the over on, even though it's only got a 52% chance of hitting according to Awesemo?
Yeah, I've got him a little bit higher than Alex does as well, point and change higher DFS wise. So it's one that I would consider. I like the fact that he does everything pretty well. Like you said, he definitely benefits from the absence of the primary ball handlers, the primary actual point guard, pass first type point guards. Playing alongside a guy like Quickly, like I said earlier about Quickly, he's less a facilitator, more a scorer, more a guy who stretches the floor and spaces things out. So that makes the ball flow through Randle a lot. And he's a very willing and very capable passer for a big man. Fantastic assist rate. He's been rebounding tremendously. He's just been spectacular in every aspect of his game this year. It's a total surprise to me, but I'm happy it's happening on my team. So yeah, I could get to it. I don't know that it would be one of my primary plays just for how far down the board it is in probability, but I like it a little bit better than Alex does. One that we do have to go back to, despite what you just said about being the last point we'll make about Nathan Knight. Looking back into Fantasy Cruncher, I just wanted to see where the boss was on it. He had him come up to about a 22-point Fanduel projection, 22.08 at 3,500. That makes him relevant. I just ran a 500 lineup crunch with Alex's projections, and he came up in 17% of them. So Alex likes Nathan Knight better than I did, and he does become relevant at that price and at that projection on FanDuel. I had him lower than that. So I would ride with the boss. In all ties, definitely the decision goes to Alex's side. So Nathan Knight is officially in play.
All right, I'm running a crunch just to see how it would look, because I think it's over for me anyway, because I played enough of Daniel Tice, I think, where I honestly wish I had paid a little bit more close attention, and that's sort of the nature of doing these shows. And you can catch me on the tip-off 4 days a week now, hanging out with Kayla and Greg and Eric and Ben Rasa, doing some of the lighter hard takes there, because you can pay a little more attention and look with a fine-tooth comb on some of these guys. And Nathan Knight, to me, I think would have been a guy I would have gotten over Tice today, which we'll see how Tice does. But man, Nathan Knight, it's fun playing like the shiny new toy, even if they are going to completely crap the bed, because at least then you have like a feeling on what Nathan Knight means to you.
Yeah, and at least you're having like that same like social experience as everybody else out there in the world. Like we're all clicking our lineups and checking them and totally disappointed in Nathan Knight's performance at the same time. So you're part of the community when you're playing those chalky plays. I like it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Robert Park playing 70% Nathan Knight. So there you go. So that's maybe too much Nathan Knight based on what I'm seeing in my crunch, but
massive cojones on that guy.
Yeah, really. That's actually, is he still not popping up for me? So I'm maybe feeling less bad if he's still not occurring for me. Oh, you know what? I do something stupid with my things where I make them, certain guys have to fit the criteria of either being, and Sims coming up as a top value play or a top 8 play. So now he wasn't popping up for that. But now I think he'll come. Oh yeah. Now he's coming in heavy, 33% to start this one out. So Nathan Knight, the play of the day, Nathan Knight.
That spectacular looking board with an Isaiah Roby up there, with a Tony Bradley up there, Nathan Knight. I mean, we got some real luminaries of the NBA on this board. Kyle Kuzma, Pochizewski, JaVale McGee's on this board. Jesus.
Yeah, apparently Nathan Knight not available on No House Advantage. So that's one unfortunate. I would slam all the overs for Nathan Knight today on No House Advantage. One other guy who it does seem is trending towards more logic, and I think this is one too where talking about the hedging with your DFS lineups of No House Advantage a bit more. Reggie Bullock's over for points plus rebounds plus assists is 79.79% chance of hitting the over, so 79.8% chance. And I think that's one you could build around more, especially if you're like me and not getting a lot of Reggie Bullock in your DFS lineups today. I was getting him some yesterday, not enough or not as much as the field. Same thing today, where I think it's a little bit of a points chase to go back through, but the opportunity's there, Terry. So, we talked about Bullock before through the lens of Draftkings and FanDuel, but 79.8% chance of getting the over on points plus rebounds assists. I don't hate it, because if he's going to play 35 to 40 minutes, he could definitely fall ass backwards into some of these things where maybe he doesn't have a great DFS day, but has a good enough day on No House Advantage to actually be one of the top plays there overall.
Anything's possible, that's for sure. I don't hate it. I mean, those are easy marks to overcome. It's just about minutes for the most part. I might look just one spot lower into the rebounds prop. We keep talking about rebounds props. It's only at 2.5, which is a really easy mark to overcome just accidentally if he's going to be out there for 36 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever Tibbs decides to throw at him the entire game. Tibbs might have him come paint the house afterward. Who knows? But I think that's really even more in play, because then we're not worried about him needing to distribute the ball, needing for his shot to go down. We just need a little bit of happenstance for the ball to fall into his hands 3 times, and we've got that one locked. For shaving a point off of the probability of it happening, I think that one might be the one I would go to rather than the combined one. I like them both. Obviously, they're both very much in play, and Alex is getting them as supremely likely plays. So I think you could go to either one, but I think the rebounds one just seems a little easier to me.
Also, I didn't pull ownership updates because I was focusing on No House Advantage and the premier offerings they have in peer-to-peer prop betting and how it's like a DFS site, but with prop betting and all the things that I like about there. But Nathan Knight up to 21% ownership on DraftKings. So I'm either making a great stand, or Nathan Knight, this is going to be the night that everybody, no pun intended, it's going to be the evening everybody plays him, and I don't have him, and I'm going to miss out on a guy with a 1.2 fantasy point per minute number.
Hey, I think you go down with the John Collins ship. And it's a direct, since Nathan Knight is going to be a direct taking away potentially, who knows? But how much Gallo did you end up with? Because that's the
I ended up with 36% Gallo.
Yeah, all right. Playing with a little bit of fire. I can't believe we're worried about Nathan Knight taking away from those two players in this situation. That's absurd. I think you're going to be fine.
I hope so. I hope you're right, Terry. I know you are my good luck charm, so I have to listen to you, but I just want you to know it's giving me a lot of apprehension right now in this moment in time.
Yeah, I don't blame you at all. Hey, something cool that I think it was Eric was talking about for No House Advantage that you can do with our optimal lineups page. There are, I don't even know how many it is, but there's like 20 pages of this thing, and there's probably 20 lineups per page. So we're giving you a hell of a lot of optimal lineup options here. It seems like, based on what Eric was saying anyway, that a lot of people, and if it wasn't Eric, forgive me, whoever did say this, it seems like a lot of people are just taking the lineups off the first, maybe the second page and running those in. And he said he was seeing a lot of success just skipping down to like the fourth or fifth page, where we're talking about still, you're running 150 lineups. You're talking about some of the top overall lineups available. So just food for thought, get away from some of the chalk and just click down into, page 3, page 4 on those, and you might get a pretty viable lineup.
And honestly, right now it looks like we have about 71% full in the $10,000 slam dunk, which is a $15 entry and is $5K to first. You could probably take that approach that Terry is talking about right now and have enough time using the promo code Awesemo on there. The deposit match you up to $50 right away. So you're basically playing for free for the most part. Obviously, you got to spend your own money too, but that's really taking advantage of the deposit bonuses and overlay. You're getting both those things on No House Advantage tonight. So check out the optimal lineups page. Maybe just plunk one in right now because it honestly seems like a good time to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you can get to overlay like that, that is the way to go for sure. So love that opportunity.
All right. And let's see what else we got here for No House Advantage. Any 50% props jump out to you on the projections page, which we do have up on the site too. So you can always play along for yourself. I believe it's free today as well. So in addition to optimal lineups page, there's really no barrier to entry here for you guys. I'm jumping in the top shot line like the rest of you to get packs right now, but
just doing that too.
My friend texted, thankfully, a
minute and a half.
But honestly, like the logical move would be instead of trying to get a pack that's probably not even going to be that great, you could probably just play a No House Advantage instead or you could do both at the same time and have a lot easier pathway to making some money on nohouseadvantage.com or downloading No House Advantage today.
Yeah, definitely. I think I love the site in general. I really am excited about like the different ways that some of these sites are going about doing this. It's reinventing the wheel to a degree, but I think in a cool, interesting way that's going to set them apart from some of the other sites. So I was stalling for time there just for a moment. I think one of the 50%-ish over-unders that I kind of like, we talked about Zach LaVine a few times. He's at a 27.5 points over under, and Alex has that like right at 50. He's 51.3% under, 48.62 over. Which side of that do you like?
Could you repeat it? I got distracted by Top Shot.
Zach LaVine, 27.5 real life points.
27.5. Let's see. I have him. I was actually looking at the Jimmy Butler under, which fits the criteria we talked about too. Just having more bodies in there. The projections aren't going to quite match up with what his opportunity is going to be today. I have LaVine today at 28.1 points. So even with him, being a play that I don't love, I think that he's still going to score tonight. So I guess I would take the over.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have him at exactly 27.5, which is the line. So, damn, good line. Alex had it 51.3 under, so I'll go with the boss and I'll ride the under.
How dare you? How dare you take the top player in DFS who's earned more than we'll ever make over me on the line that I put together? I think the one thing that he has going for him is that not having Kobe White in the same groups is going to make a little bit less usage for everybody around him. And it's, I guess, to a lesser extent, Wendell Carter too. Thad in there is going to set up more shots. You do have Lowry eating some possessions, but I would just lean a little bit over, but I get why you'd go under here. And, there are certainly enough pathways for him to go under that wouldn't be shocking. And we are locked now. And before we jump off, let's see. Oh, 19,450 in the queue. Looks like I'll be getting myself a pack.
Wow.
The money plays are big off.
Wow, the money jacket pays off.
How did you do? Did you get one?
I haven't got my number yet.
Oh, okay. I guess they must be taking a while for the non-VIPs.
Is that how it is? Where's our promo packs then, man? Come on.
I know. Honestly, I really missed the boat not getting Pete to hook me up with whatever shit that he got earlier.
That's right. Yeah, you're like tied in with that.
I know. I really missed the boat. I was actually collecting the challenges of my Conley challenge today because I had enough money in my account from selling a couple of the Seeing Stars ones, and I was like, I'll just do a collection. And now I have a collection, and I have to hold on to it for 15 days like an asshole. It's gonna be $10 when it's done.
Some of the collections have paid off nicely, but I hate just having to hold on to them. I wish they would make those challenges a little bit shorter. And it looks like I'm in the 40,000s. So unless we got a lot of failed transactions, I am not getting there.
I'm sorry. Hey, Terry, maybe I'll fail just on purpose for you. That would have no chance of going. No, I will be getting my pack happily, and I'll be back in an hour and a half for the late Slate Sweat and Swap show with Greg Ehrenberg. Hopefully he got a pack too, and we can talk about all the cool moments that we got that Terry won't even have access to. But we appreciate you guys. Terry, any final plugs for you before we call it quits?
No, apparently I've got to go fire up my marketplace and just sit there clicking refresh all night so I can start sniping these things when you guys start selling them at the wrong prices.
And even if you didn't play on No House Advantage today, just if you're a new sign up, go over there. You take advantage of the deposit match with the promo code Awesemo. They'll give you $50 when you deposit $50 on there, and you can play tomorrow. Again, there was overlay today, and we've been pushing them all day long, so that just happens sometimes in No House Advantage. So it could happen again tomorrow. Play over there, and make sure to be smart about it. Use that promo code Awesemo to get the $50 deposit match for yourself. Again, I'll be back in 90 minutes, so subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned, and be back to you guys in a little bit. Good luck until then, and bye.